In the bustling metropolis, amidst the endless flow of people and cars, a story of two old friends was unfolding. In a brightly lit lecture hall, a math class was in session. Dozens of students, heads bowed, diligently copied down formulas as their instructor confidently led the lesson. Two female students watched her with admiration, hanging on her every word. To them, she wasn't just a teacher, but a true idol. The chalk glided smoothly across the board, leaving complex equations in its wake. Every movement of the teacher's hand was polished and precise. With a warm smile, she announced that class was over for the day. This was Lim Jiyoo, Korea's top-ranked math instructor for college entrance exams. She was not only a genius, but also stunningly beautiful. The moment the lecture ended, Jiyoo was swarmed by a crowd of adoring students. Everyone wanted to touch her hand, even for a second, as if she were a pop star. But she politely declined, citing a lack of time. Waving goodbye to her admirers, Jiyoo, accompanied by her assistants, left the lecture hall. The students couldn't calm down for a long time. One guy was on cloud nine for having held her hand, while the girls discussed how much prettier she was in person than in her online lectures. They were watching her appearance on a popular TV show on a phone. Everyone was amazed by her schedule, working at a prestigious academy in Gangnam, holding in-person lectures and filming for television. It was a mystery when she ever slept. Rumor had it that her income was comparable to that of a small company. The students joked that with that kind of money, they'd give up sleep too. Everyone was plagued by the same question. Who could such an incredible woman possibly be dating? She must have absolutely no time for a personal life. Late at night, exhausted after a long day, Jiyoo got into her car. Someone on the phone wished her a good rest. She drove through the night city, mentally running through her tasks, manuscript sent, tomorrow's class to prepare for. Then she realized she had only eaten a couple of caramels all day. A sudden pang of hunger gave her a brilliant idea: to raid the fridge of her friend, Kim Dokyung. She pressed the call button on her car's dashboard. When the call connected, she answered, thinking it was her assistant, Minji, who might have forgotten something. But a quiet voice on the line said her name, and Jiyoo froze. It wasn't who she was expecting. She realized with dread who was calling. If she had known, she would have never answered. The caller ID displayed the contact name, Trash. After all this time, her ex-boyfriend was calling her. As cold as ice, she asked what he wanted. In response, he dropped a bombshell. He was getting married soon. Jiyoo was completely unfazed, but he continued, insisting he still thought about her a lot. She just scoffed, sarcastically asking if he missed her or her money. He swore he had genuinely loved her. That was the last straw. Calling him a loser, Jiyoo furiously ended the call. She was seething with anger. That call had ruined her entire evening. Enraged, she decided she desperately needed a drink. Jiyoo floored the gas pedal, heading towards Dokyung's place, and sped past a massive billboard featuring his face. The poster was for the musical Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, with him in the lead role. Meanwhile, in the audience, fans were sitting with a banner in support of Kim Dokyung. And on stage, he shone. Kim Dokyung, a top idol and musical star. After the performance, the entire cast took a bow to the thunderous applause of the audience. Backstage, colleagues congratulated Dokyung on a brilliant performance. Soon, his manager appeared and told him the car was waiting. Saying goodbye to everyone, Dokyung headed for the exit. Outside, a crowd of loyal fans was already waiting for him, chanting his name. In the car, Dokyung asked his manager, Yoon-soo, if he was free tomorrow. He confirmed that Dokyung had the day off. Yoon-soo looked at his client, thinking that he hadn't changed a bit since his debut. Kim Dokyung was still just as incredibly handsome. Even at the very beginning of his career, when he was still an idol, his looks were stunning. His rise to fame was meteoric. He debuted in a group and quickly reached the top. And after the group disbanded, his solo career skyrocketed. Tickets for any musical he starred in sold out in minutes. Thanks to his talent, he had collected every conceivable acting award. Without a doubt, he was the most successful solo artist of his generation. Yoon-soo mused that in all this time, Dokyung had never had a single scandal, and his fan base was unshakable. Even he, who was constantly by his side, had never seen Dokyung date anyone. At that very moment, Dokyung was looking at his phone. A message from Lim Jiyoo popped up on the screen. "I'm coming over. You're out of booze." A faint, warm smile flickered across his lips. Soon, Jiyoo was entering the elite residential complex, opening the door with her own key. She confidently walked into the spacious penthouse, making herself right at home. Without wasting any time, she went straight to the refrigerator and grabbed a can of beer. The characteristic pop of an opening can echoed in the quiet apartment. She took a long, greedy gulp, savoring the cool liquid. Settling onto the sofa, Jiyoo let out a sigh of relief. This was exactly what she needed. Suddenly, a man emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in nothing but a towel. He reproachfully asked why she always came over without permission and helped herself to his fridge. It was Dokyung. Jiyoo blinked in surprise. She didn't think he was home yet. As it turned out, they were not just friends, but also neighbors. Their apartments were in the same building, one above the other. Dokyung decided to tease her, asking what she would do if she had walked in on him with a girlfriend. Jiyoo just scoffed, confidently declaring that he didn't have one. Otherwise, she would definitely know. Their friendship had lasted for 17 years, ever since they were 15. She was so certain of their platonic relationship that even the sight of her half-naked friend didn't faze her in the slightest. She calmly sipped her beer while he stood beside her. To her, there was nothing unusual about this scene. A classic case of a guy and girl who are best friends. At least, that's what she thought. He, on the other hand, looked slightly flustered. But as it turned out, she was wrong. 2 empty beer cans lay on the floor, and their bare feet were touching in a dangerously close proximity. In the next second, reality exploded. They were kissing on the sofa, desperately and passionately. Jiyoo's mind refused to believe what was happening. How did it come to this? To understand, we need to go back 12 years, to when they were 20. At a table laden with food and drinks, one of their friends asked a question. What did they see themselves doing at 30? The group cheerfully discussed the future. Jiyoo guessed she'd probably be married by then, to which Dokyung just snorted. He confidently declared that he would get married long before she would. Their friend, Lim Jiyoo, chimed in with a playful suggestion. If they were both still single by 32, they should just start dating each other. Dokyung laughed, calling the idea absurd. Him and Jiyoo? Never. Jiyoo pretended to be offended, stating that she was very popular and definitely wouldn't be single at 32. She jokingly added that if she did have to date him, she would change her last name. Their banter ended in a playful bet, with Jiyoo as their witness. Their friend thought with a sly smile that Jiyoo would probably have to change her last name after all. And now, 12 years later, they were both 32, just a few hours before that very moment. Dokyung, now dressed, sat next to Jiyoo on the sofa as she animatedly told him about the call from her ex. She got so angry recalling the conversation that she unconsciously squeezed the beer can in her hand. The sharp edge of the aluminum cut her finger, and it started to bleed. She cried out in pain. Dokyung immediately jumped up, calling her a klutz and telling her to sit still. He returned with a first aid kit to treat the wound. He took her by the wrist, and she flinched at his unexpected touch. In the next moment, he brought her finger to his lips and licked off the drop of blood. The air crackled with sudden intimacy. Jiyoo froze in shock, feeling his tongue. He, as if nothing had happened, stated that the bleeding had stopped. Then he looked at her seriously and asked if she still loved her ex. The question caught her off guard. She started to deny it, and her emotions got the better of her. Jiyoo said bitterly that at 32, her love life was probably over. Dokyung looked at her with an unreadable expression. He gently held her hand. He remembered that old joke. It was said in jest, but here they were. Both 32 and both single. His thoughts revealed a confession. He had been waiting for this age to use that joke as an excuse. He had always looked at her with a special tenderness. He had wanted to confess his feelings to her for a long time. But he was afraid of ruining everything, because to her, he was just a friend she could be herself with. He was too afraid of losing their friendship if things went wrong and became awkward between them. And she had no idea what a fire had been burning inside him all this time. He squeezed her hand and asked if she knew how old they were. She didn't understand the strange question and began to answer, 32. But she couldn't finish. Dokyung leaned in and kissed her, leaving her in complete shock. She pushed him away, frantically asking if he was drunk and what he was doing. He held her hand firmly, reminding her of their pact. If they were still single at 32, they would start dating. Looking her straight in the eye, he said, "So date me, Lim Jiyoo." Her mind was in chaos. Who takes a joke like that seriously? Her heart was pounding wildly, and she wondered if maybe she was the one who was drunk. He waited for her answer, his gaze full of determination. Flustered, she began to stammer that it was impossible, that she didn't even see him as a man. In desperation, she blurted out that she couldn't imagine kissing or being intimate with him. His expression darkened. "How can you be so sure if you haven't even tried?" he asked quietly. and before she could answer, he swept her up into his arms. She protested, but he was already carrying her towards the bedroom. He gently laid her down on the bed. Then he took out his phone, completely confusing her. A timer was running on the screen. 10 minutes. I'll seduce you in 10 minutes. I'll make you want to be mine. He declared and ripped off his shirt in one swift motion. He stood before her in all his glory and gave her one last chance to back out, telling her to speak up if she didn't want this. His shirt fell to the floor. He leaned over her, promising he wouldn't force anything. His kiss was different this time. Dominant, demanding, leaving no doubt about his intentions. He pulled away for a moment and, breathing heavily, asked, "Do you really not want this?" She was silent, unable to utter a word. Seeing the blush on her cheeks, he knew he had won and smiled. He continued his caresses, and Jiyoo was amazed at how skilled he was. Where did he learn all this? Waking up in the morning, Jiyoo felt cold. She felt something soft and warm beneath her hand. Opening her eyes, she saw Dokyung sleeping beside her. The realization hit her like an avalanche. She spent the night with Kim Dokyung. A fragment of a memory flashed in her mind, her hand taking his. And her own words, agreeing to be his girlfriend. Were they dating now? She had always been sure that nothing could ever happen between them, even if they were stranded on a deserted island. She sat up abruptly. Dokyung was already awake. He was lounging, propping his head up with his hand, and greeted her with a smirk. "Sleep well, girlfriend?" Jiyoo panicked, yelling that they were drunk and it didn't count. She tried to cover herself, screaming at him not to look. He just chuckled, pointing out that he had already seen everything last night. So what was the fuss about now? She cried out his name in desperation. "Not Kim Dokyung, your boyfriend." He calmly corrected her. She kept insisting that it was all ridiculous and absurd. Then he grew serious and asked if she really didn't remember anything. He pointed to the love bites on her chest and added that if she didn't remember, he could help her remember everything. Jiyoo flushed to the roots of her hair. Suddenly, she jumped up as if she'd remembered something important, claiming she had a lecture and had to run. Before he could say a word, she fled from the apartment. Dokyung was left alone, a mixture of annoyance and amusement on his face. The next day, Jiyoo was in her office at the academy. She was suffering from a burning sense of shame. She couldn't believe what had happened and was too embarrassed to even ask him about it. She remembered everything up to the kiss, and to her horror, admitted to herself that the kiss had been incredibly good. She tried so desperately to push the thoughts out of her head that her colleagues looked at her with concern. Just then, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Dokyung. "Girlfriend, let's have dinner." She was shocked by his casualness. Jiyoo decided to just ignore him and focus on her work. Dokyung sat with his phone, seeing that she wasn't answering and had even turned off the sound. He had already sent several messages. A determined look appeared on his face. "Lim Jiyoo." "You just wait." Jiyoo finished her lecture and said goodbye to her students. As she was leaving the classroom, she exchanged a few words with a colleague. She mentally admitted to herself that she couldn't concentrate at all today. Suddenly, she overheard the excited voices of students. They were discussing seeing Kim Dokyung there. Jiyoo froze. Kim Dokyung was here? At her academy? She frantically looked around, trying to figure out what he was doing here. Her gaze fell on a crowd of female staff gathered by the door to her office. He was in there. She rushed into her office, hoping to somehow avoid him. But it was too late. He was already sitting in her chair, legs casually crossed, wearing dark sunglasses. He took off his glasses and casually asked if her class was over. Jiyoo peeked into the hallway and realized his appearance had caused a real sensation. Her colleagues were already whispering, wondering what connected their director and the famous actor. She knew this would become the main gossip at the academy. She took his hand. She dragged him along, trying to escape the curious eyes. Once they were in the parking lot, she confronted him with reproaches. In his car, she continued to fume. He calmly replied that his girlfriend wasn't answering his calls, and he got worried. He asked again if she really didn't remember. This time, she decided to lie, saying she didn't. He didn't believe her and demanded she look him in the eye. She couldn't meet his gaze. Nervously fidgeting with her skirt, she stubbornly insisted that she remembered nothing. He leaned in with a smirk, offering to describe in detail what had happened between them that night. She immediately gave in, admitting that she remembered, but not everything. He demanded she tell him what exactly she remembered. Blushing, she whispered that she remembered the kiss. "Keep going," he encouraged with a slight smile. She shyly admitted that she also remembered his 10-minute seduction. Then she exploded again, shouting that even though she had called herself his girlfriend, she was drunk. She muttered something under her breath, completely flustered. Finally, she dared to ask the main question. Did they actually do it? Because she really didn't remember that part. A vivid and unambiguous image of that night flashed before her eyes. Yes, we did, he calmly confirmed. She looked at him suspiciously. So, are we really dating now? She asked with a mix of hope and fear. He said the choice was hers to make. Jiyoo tried to brush it off as drunk talk. Suddenly, his face became serious. Not a single moment of that night was a joke to me, he said firmly. Jiyoo froze, stunned by his words. He continued, explaining that it wasn't an accident or a moment of passion. I really like you, Jiyoo, he confessed. Her heart skipped a beat. Their eyes met. She felt like her heart was about to burst out of her chest. Trying to break the tension, she again tried to change the subject. She grabbed her seatbelt, saying that since he came to pick her up, it was time to go home. But her hands were so sweaty with nerves that they kept slipping off the buckle. He silently watched her futile attempts. Then he leaned over and buckled her seatbelt himself, their faces dangerously close. Lim Jiyoo, he called her name softly. She was so flustered she didn't know what to do with herself. Are you going to keep dodging the question? He asked. A hint of hurt appeared in his voice. Do you dislike me that much? Of course not, she blurted out immediately. He leaned in gently towards her. But instead of a kiss, he took a blanket and covered her. He said she must be tired and advised her to sleep on the way. And again, with a warm smile, he added, Girlfriend. She hid under the blanket, completely flustered. Only one thought pounded in her head. Why is he always so direct? Later, they were sitting in a chic restaurant. Dokyung had ordered steaks for them. She thanked him, still feeling a bit awkward. She was confused. She thought they were just grabbing a quick bite, but he had brought her to a perfect date spot. Eating steak for lunch seemed strange to her, but she had to admit, it was delicious. She got some sauce on her cheek, and without a word, he wiped it off with his finger. Then he licked the sauce from his finger and teased that his girlfriend had nerves of steel. Jiyoo blushed furiously. Dokyung was already making plans for the evening, suggesting a movie. She panickedly refused, saying she had to go to the academy. He worriedly noted that she was working too much and not eating well, adding a suggestive comment about how thin she was. His words made her choke on her wine. He offered to take her, but she refused, reminding him that she had her own car. But he was insistent, saying he would take her and pick her up. When he asked what time she finished, she almost answered but caught herself in time. She got annoyed, asking why he needed to know. Her patience snapped. She asked why he had suddenly become so clingy and if he was ready to so easily throw away 17 years of their friendship. He cut her off, firmly stating that their friendship had ended the night they spent together. Jiyoo hastily silenced him. At that moment, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Kisoo-jin. He answered, and Jiyoo heard a woman's voice. She racked her brain trying to remember who it was. And then she remembered Kisoo-jin, his musical co-star. A successful singer, a former teen star. Jiyoo thought she was very beautiful and 8 years younger than them. Soo-jin persistently asked him to meet, but he coldly replied that he was busy. He cut off all her attempts to persuade him. Jiyoo was amazed at how icy his tone was with her. It was a stark reminder that a huge star was sitting next to her. He abruptly ended the conversation and hung up. Turning back to Jiyoo, he asked as if nothing had happened if she was done eating. He told her she needed to eat more and caringly brought a fork with a piece of steak to her lips. Eat well, my girlfriend, he said with a tender smile. Jiyoo's heart fluttered. The contrast between his coldness with Soo-jin and his tenderness with her was striking. She realized she could no longer pretend they were just friends. She sat with her head down, completely absorbed in her new feelings. They arrived at the academy in his luxury car. He turned to her and noticed she had fallen asleep again. She looked so peaceful in her sleep. He thought she must be very tired and decided to let her sleep a little longer. She woke up and asked what time it was. He replied it was 6:20 and said he would wait for her. She tried to talk him out of it, telling him to go home since she didn't know when she'd be finished. He reminded her she was without a car. She brushed it off, saying taxis exist. He smiled, saying he didn't bring her here just to send her off in a taxi. He promised to be somewhere nearby and wait for her message. Flustered, she muttered for him to do as he pleased. And she hurried into the building. He watched her go with a satisfied smile. Jiyoo entered the conference room to start a meeting. but all her employees were staring at her with glowing eyes. They bombarded her with questions about Kim Dokyung. The whole internet was buzzing about their friendship. They showed her a forum post where students were already speculating about their potential romance. And the photo that had gone viral. Her colleagues wouldn't let up, demanding details and not believing in their friendship. She awkwardly laughed it off, continuing to insist they were just friends. She assured them they had known each other since middle school, but they clearly didn't believe her. She tried to maintain her composure. Just then, Dokyung appeared in the doorway with a bag of food. He said he thought she might get hungry during the meeting and brought snacks. Her colleagues were thrilled by his thoughtfulness. One of them was already mentally planning their wedding. Jiyoo, laughing nervously, tried to usher him out. He played along, talking about them going home together. She literally pushed him out the door. He was waiting for her by his car. She confronted him, scolding him for starting rumors. He calmly told her to get in the car. She wouldn't let up, sarcastically suggesting he just announced to everyone that they were dating. He smirked and asked if he should call a reporter right now. She panicked, yelling that she hated this kind of attention and that she needed to be careful. He said he was ready for anything, even an official article confirming their relationship. Jiyoo momentarily imagined what would happen if everyone found out she was Kim Dokyung's girlfriend. She pictured a million-strong army of his angry fans. She asked him to just tell everyone they were friends. He immediately latched onto her words about not knowing what will happen next. She explained that a scandal could ruin her business and the Academy's reputation, showing an example of a typical post from a disgruntled parent. She asked if he was ready to take responsibility if her academy went under. His hands tightened on the wheel. "Of course. How should I take responsibility?" he asked calmly. She was totally taken aback by his answer. He looked at her with a dead serious expression and said, "I'll take responsibility. Marry me." Jiyoo was completely speechless. On a different day, Jiyoo was leading an online class, cheering her students up after their mock exams. She told them she understood their stress and everything they were going through. With a smile, she reminded them that their real goal was the university entrance exams. And with that, she started breaking down the assignments. After the shoot, she was totally wiped out, just standing under the shower. Exhaustion was written all over her face. She collapsed onto the bed, not understanding why a simple lecture recording was so draining. To try and pull herself together, she decided to put on a sheet mask. Relaxing on the bed, she finally felt some long-awaited relief. But her peace was interrupted by a call from her mom. Before Jiyoo could get a word in, her mom launched into the usual lecture about working less and finding a husband. Jiyoo thought gloomily that this pressure had started the exact day she turned 30. She had learned how to just tune these conversations out. But her mom noticed she wasn't listening and announced that she'd come prepared this time. She had set Jiyoo up on a blind date at a hotel and demanded she not cancel it. Jiyoo tried to protest, but her mom was already listing the guy's pros. He was the director of a plastic surgery clinic. Her mother lamented that everyone else had news to share. Weddings, babies, while her daughter's life was just crickets. At that moment, on an impulse, Jiyoo blurted out, "I have news." Dokyung's words and his confession flashed through her head. That serious look in his eyes with not a hint of a joke. "I have a boyfriend," she said firmly into the phone. Her mother immediately started demanding details, but Jiyoo, claiming she was busy, quickly hung up. She ended the call, breathing heavily. She had just called Kim Dokyung her boyfriend with her own two lips. Meanwhile, Dokyung was at home, staring longingly at his phone. He was waiting for Jiyoo to show up. He sent her a playful text, threatening to break in if she wasn't there in 3 minutes. He didn't get why she was taking so long. It's only a 3-minute walk, and it had already been 20. He started to get worried. She used to always come running for these cupcakes. Was she avoiding him? The doorbell rang. Jiyoo was at the door. He was surprised she didn't just use the key code. He noticed she was acting a little strange. And then he saw that she was all dressed up. It turned out that 20 minutes ago, after getting his text, Jiyoo was about to head right over. She didn't understand what the rush was. But as she was leaving the apartment, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She saw herself, messy hair, an old t-shirt, and worn-out slippers. She thought she should at least put on some lipstick. That turned into a frantic session of changing clothes and doing her hair. And now they were standing face to face and the tension was thick in the air. She awkwardly thought she might have overdone it. He was completely captivated by her look and silently let her in. Her eyes immediately fell on the cupcakes. With childlike excitement, she asked if she could eat them all, and he, still dazed, just nodded. He thought about how cute she was and that all the effort was unnecessary. She's beautiful regardless. He tried to keep his cool while she happily polished off the dessert. He was worried she was working on an empty stomach again and decided he'd just feed her and let her go. No, then she turned to him and asked why he wasn't eating anything. His gaze slid down to her neckline, stopping at her heart-shaped pendant. Something clicked in his head. He reached out to her, and in the next moment, he yanked her onto his lap. She let out a small shriek of surprise. "I was going to just let you eat the cupcakes and leave," he whispered in her ear. "But you showed up looking way too beautiful." The tension between them hit the breaking point. He asked if they should kiss and immediately pulled her into a deep one. She was melting in his arms, thinking about how good it felt. She tried to pull away for a second to catch her breath. "Why? Don't you like it?" he whispered, not giving her a chance to think. He pinned her down on the sofa. "Do you want to do something else?" he asked breathlessly. The next day, the SNT entertainment office was quiet. Kim Dokyung sat alone on the sofa, lost in his thoughts. He was thinking about last night, and the way her body felt was driving him crazy. Vivid moments of their intimacy flashed before his eyes. He remembered how she suddenly jumped up. There was terror in her eyes as she realized she wanted it just as much as he did. She pretended she remembered something she had to do and said she had to go. He was totally confused by her sudden mood swing. She fled, leaving him completely baffled. But now, thinking back on it, he smiled. He realized she was just embarrassed, and he found it incredibly cute. His manager interrupted his smile, asking why he was in such a good mood. He reminded Dokyung they needed to start recording tracks for the concert. The manager insisted they were running out of time. There was a packed schedule ahead: an album, promo tours, TV shows. He mentioned that fans were already going crazy, getting ready for the ticket war. When the manager asked about acting roles again, Dokyung flatly refused. The manager just sighed. He never changed on that front. He started listing the confirmed variety shows. He told Dokyung to let him know if he wanted to change anything in the schedule. Dokyung's eyes caught one specific line. It was a show called Let's Date. He asked sarcastically if he looked like he was 20. The manager explained it's a popular show about virtual dating for celebrities. He said he'd already turned them down a few times, but the producer was really persistent. Dokyung brushed it off, saying it wasn't his style. He stood up, getting ready to head out. The manager asked in surprise where he was going, since he had no plans until dinner. "It's a secret," Dokyung smiled mysteriously, putting a finger to his lips. Meanwhile, Jiyoo was at a beauty salon getting her hair and makeup done for a shoot. She checked her phone. It was almost 1 p.m. and there wasn't a single text from him. She was mad at herself for even waiting for a call or message. She tried to tell herself it was no big deal. It wasn't her first kiss. But memories of last night wouldn't leave her alone. She got so worked up that the stylist had to ask her to sit still. When everything was done, she looked stunning. The salon director gave her a compliment. And then, lowering her voice, she asked about her relationship with Kim Dokyung. Jiyoo frantically tried to assure her they'd just been friends for 17 years. Right then, her phone rang. His name popped up on the screen. He briefly asked what floor the salon was on. Once he got the answer, he hung up before she could say a word. Suddenly, a hand rested on her shoulder. "Surprise," Dokyung said, appearing out of nowhere. Everyone in the salon gasped when they saw him. Jiyoo, in shock, asked how he found her. He explained he stopped by her office and then guessed she was at the salon. He handed her a bag. He brought her a sandwich, knowing she'd skip lunch again. Saying he had to go, he added that he couldn't stay. She was touched. He admitted the sandwich was just an excuse. The truth was, he just missed her. Jiyoo laughed nervously, thinking he was acting like they'd already announced their relationship to everyone. As he was leaving, he mentioned he'd be out late for a cast dinner after his show. She was flustered, not knowing why he was telling her this. But he was already gone. The salon director said admiringly that she'd never seen such a handsome man and that their relationship definitely didn't look like just friends. Jiyoo just stood there, blushing hard and clutching the bag. Inside were neatly packed fruit sandwiches. That evening, Dokyung was at dinner with his musical colleagues. They were noisily celebrating another success. Everyone congratulated him on the sold-out show, but he modestly said it was all thanks to a good script. Dokyung went outside to check his phone. He was worried if Jiyoo made it home okay. Suddenly, someone called his name. It was Ki-soo-jin walking up to him. She looked at him expectantly. She started complaining about the cold, flirtatiously hinting she might get sick and pass it on to him. And she brought up their many stage kisses. He tiredly asked her to just finish the remaining shows without any drama. She confessed she wished their show would never end so she could see him every day. She grabbed his hand, begging for a chance to date for just a month. He yanked his hand away, saying he only put up with her because they were co-workers. She was in despair, not getting why he was the only one rejecting her when everyone else was crazy about her. He realized talking to her was useless. Moments from when they first met came to mind. At first, he didn't think she'd be this clingy. She said she'd been his fan since middle school, and that she only became famous to meet him. He saw her as just a hardworking colleague, nothing more. But then, she started confessing her love. He rejected her many times, but it didn't help. The more he avoided her, the more persistent she became. Eventually, he had to cut off all communication with her outside of rehearsals. He couldn't ruin the last 10 shows over personal problems. He closed his eyes tiredly. He decided to just hang in there until the end of the musical. Soojin watched him leave with fury. She wasn't planning to give up. She swore she'd get him, no matter what it takes. Dokyung got in his car and drove away. He tried to call Jiyoo but got her voicemail. He was surprised she was already asleep. She usually stayed up late. He glanced in the rearview mirror and realized today was that day again. In her bed, Jiyoo was tossing and turning, her face flushed with fever. She was mumbling something, clearly in pain. When she opened her eyes, she saw Dokyung sitting on the edge of her bed. She wondered when he managed to get back from dinner. She didn't get why he was sitting in such an uncomfortable position instead of lying on the sofa. She looked under the covers and found a heating pad on her stomach. That's why she felt so warm. And she was wearing warm socks he must have put on her. She quietly got up. She took a blanket and carefully covered him. She sat on the floor next to him, just watching him sleep. There was a look of pure tenderness in her eyes. He stirred in his sleep and, without opening his eyes, pulled her close. She remembered he'd always been this caring, even back in middle school. That was when a new student joined their class. It was a young Kim Dokyung. He politely greeted the class. Everyone was blown away by his looks. He became incredibly popular from day one. The teacher asked Jiyoo, as the class president, to help the new kid settle in. She went up to him, but he looked tired and distant. He gave her cold, one-word answers. At first, she thought he was rude and annoying. No, she soon realized it was just a mask. She always had really painful periods, which made her miss school often. Sometimes the pain was so bad she couldn't even get up from her desk. One day, Dokyung saw her like that. He tried to wake her up, but she passed out from the pain and fell to the floor. He panicked and shouted for someone to call a teacher. He carefully supported her head, looking genuinely worried. Eventually, he carried her on his back to the nurse's office. He looked exhausted, but he didn't let go of her. Ever since then, he always took care of her during those days, taking her to the nurse or even carrying her home. Back in the present, she looked at the sleeping Dokyung. She thought about his recent confession. She thought about how sincere he was. He'd been by her side for 17 years, always reliable and caring. And in that moment, she finally realized she couldn't imagine her life without him. Jiyoo slowly came to, her eyes opening in a sun-drenched bedroom. Consciousness returned slowly, and the first question that floated through her mind was how she'd even gotten here. Her mind was a swarm of question marks. She had absolutely no memory of getting into bed. Her memory started to clear. The last thing she could recall was sitting next to Dokyung, wrapped in a blanket. Looking around, she realized he was nowhere to be seen. Where could he have gone? She found him in the kitchen, already busy at the stove. Jiyoo chided him for not waking her up, but Dokyung just caringly asked if her pain had subsided. He explained with a warm smile that he was well aware of her monthly discomfort, which is why he'd taken care of everything. Such thoughtfulness made Jiyoo's cheeks flush. She couldn't help but admire him, thinking that the apron suited him incredibly well. He placed a bowl of hot porridge, made with special care, in front of her. Jiyoo was surprised by the choice of dish, but Dokyung had thought of everything. He knew she had trouble with digestion during this time. Although she had no appetite, it was impossible to refuse such care. She began to eat gratefully. She asked if he had eaten, but Dokyung replied that he didn't usually eat breakfast. With a gentle smile, he added that just watching her eat was enough for him. His words made Jiyoo's heart skip a beat, and she blushed in embarrassment. After finishing her breakfast, she thanked him, remarking that he must be tired too after his cast dinner the night before. Dokyung waved it off as nothing and asked where her car was. Jiyoo explained that she had felt sick the previous night and had taken a taxi, leaving her car at the academy. He immediately offered to drive her to work, since his own studio time wasn't until the afternoon. Jiyoo started to refuse, insisting she could just take a taxi. Before she could even say a word, Dokyung swept her up into his arms. Jiyoo was in shock, demanding he put her down immediately, telling him he was going too far. But he had no intention of listening, carrying her confidently toward the bedroom, ignoring all her protests and her shouts of his name. He laid her down in bed, and on the nightstand, a complete comfort kit was already waiting for her. A heat pack, warm tea, and sweet snacks. Dokyung gently kissed her cheek and promised to be back from the studio in time to pick her up for work. As he was leaving, he added that she should call him immediately if she felt worse. Jiyoo was left in bed, completely stunned by his level of care. Meanwhile, at the SNT recording studio, work was in full swing. Dokyung and his colleague were preparing for another session. Wearing headphones in front of the microphone, Dokyung poured himself into the music, his voice flowing effortlessly and confidently. His colleague noted thoughtfully that Dokyung, who had been in a creative slump for a while, had suddenly composed a new track in record time. The recording was done in a single take. Everything went perfectly. Coming out of the booth, Dokyung received a compliment from his colleague. His voice was on point today. The colleague handed him a bottle of water, remarking thoughtfully that something about Dokyung seemed different. Dokyung took a sip, not understanding what he was getting at, and then came the direct question that caught him completely off guard. Was he dating someone? Dokyung choked on his water. After recovering, he indignantly asked what kind of nonsense he was spouting. His colleague laughed, explaining that Dokyung had a completely different vibe while recording, and the song itself was so sweet it could make your ears melt. Dokyung shyly admitted that he wrote the song thinking of Jiyoo, with a smooth, slow-tempo jazz melody. He wanted the lyrics to be as lovely and bouncy as she was. So it was no surprise that the song turned out to be the most romantic thing he had ever written. Trying to hide his embarrassment, Dokyung declared that he was always good, and now that the recording was done, he had to leave. Watching him go, his colleague chuckled to himself. Dokyung was truly head over heels. He promised to call when the track was released. In the car, Jiyoo once again tried to protest, insisting that he didn't need to drive her. But Dokyung cut her off with a warm smirk, stating that he wanted to drive her. Then he told her to open the glove box, piquing her curiosity. Inside was a ticket to a musical. Her heart fluttered with anticipation. Dokyung explained it was a ticket to his show, which was in 2 days. He pointed out reproachfully that she had never been to one of his shows, to which Jiyoo mumbled embarrassedly that she had been busy. With a hopeful look, he asked her to come, saying he knew she didn't have classes that day. Jiyoo was surprised he knew her schedule, but Dokyung just smiled smugly. He had checked it on the Academy's website. He stopped the car and turned to her, asking with insistence if she would come to his show. Dokyung leaned in abruptly, making her heart pound in her chest. She didn't understand why he was suddenly so close. She could feel his hot breath on her lips, and a sweet shiver ran through her entire body. Unable to resist, she blurted out that she would definitely come. A satisfied smile touched his lips. He pulled back, leaving Jiyoo to sit there, flushed and fumbling with her seatbelt. Dokyung said he would be waiting. Jiyoo, however, realized that this wasn't just a conversation. It was almost a kiss. 2 days later, on the day of the musical, Jiyoo faced the timeless female dilemma. What to wear? She went through outfit after outfit, but nothing seemed right. In despair, she grabbed her head. Why was she so worked up over a simple trip to the theater? She was angry at herself for being so anxious. Dokyung had a performance, and she was worrying about something so trivial. But then she remembered this would be the first time she'd see him on stage since his Idol days. If she was going, she had to look the part. The decision was made. She was heading to the department store to find the perfect outfit. In a high-end boutique, a sales associate was gushing over how amazing one of the dresses looked on her. Jiyoo was hesitant, wondering if it was a bit too much, but the associate assured her it highlighted her figure perfectly. The purchase was made, and a satisfied Jiyoo left the store. The next stop was a beauty salon, where her makeup artist was already waiting. Jiyoo asked for a more natural look than usual, since it wasn't for a photo shoot. The makeup artist immediately guessed it was for a date, and noted with envy how much Jiyoo's face was glowing. She enthusiastically promised to pour her soul into making her look as beautiful as spring. At the theater entrance, a crowd was gathered, looking at the poster for today's cast, Kim Dokyung and Ki Soo-jin in the lead roles. After parking, Jiyoo had a moment of doubt, wondering if she had overdone it with the salon makeup. But she quickly pushed the thought away. After all, it was her first musical, and she had to look her best. Her arrival did not go unnoticed. Men around her started whispering, nudging each other. All eyes were on her, and the guys couldn't hide their admiration. Stepping out of the car, she caused a sensation. People wondered who this stunning woman was, a model or an influencer. Jiyoo thought with a slight smile that her look was probably a success. An announcement echoed through the hall, thanking the audience for coming to the musical Count de Beuil. Everyone was asked to turn off their mobile devices. The show was about to begin. The lights dimmed, and a lone figure appeared on stage in a spotlight. The performance began. The first notes, the first words. Dokyung, in the role of the Count, sang of love at first sight, his voice mesmerizing. Jiyoo watched him, unable to hide her awe. It was incredible. She knew he could sing, but this was completely different from his concerts. The man on stage wasn't the Dokyung she knew. He was a completely different person, fully immersed in his character. His chemistry with the other actors was so natural, and he looked absolutely amazing. The heroine appeared on stage, her steps echoing in the silence. She asked if he was the infamous Count, to which he replied that in her presence he was merely a man hoping for her glance. According to the plot, the heroine Ellie would fall in love with the Count. It suddenly dawned on Jiyoo. The actress playing Ellie today was Ki Soo-jin. The climax unfolded on stage. The Count confessed his love to Ellie, his words filled with passion. He pulled her in for a kiss. The kiss was so convincing it took Jiyoo's breath away. The scene reflected in her wide eyes, and in that moment she felt a sharp pang of jealousy. It was just acting, but it looked as if they were truly in love, just like their own kiss. At that moment, Dokyung, even on stage, seemed to feel her gaze and looked directly at her. After the show, Jiyoo headed backstage with a bouquet of flowers. A staff member, learning she was there for Dokyung, kindly showed her the way to his dressing room. She remembered his text message, where he'd asked her to come back after the show, affectionately calling her darling. In the women's restroom, she tried to compose herself. The image of Dokyung and Soo-jin's kiss was seared into her mind. She knew the plot, but seeing it was unbearable. She tried to calm down, but troubling thoughts crept in. Were they actually close? She recalled once overhearing Soo-jin wanting to meet him even on a day off. Gathering her courage, she decided she should at least congratulate him on a wonderful performance. Just then, she heard a voice from around the corner asking Soo-jin if she and Dokyung were dating. Soo-jin coyly replied that they were just getting to know each other, and her friend remarked on how intense their kissing scene was. Around the corner, Jiyoo overheard Soo-jin talking with her friends. She was bragging that she'd had a crush on Dokyung for years, even becoming a singer just to see him, and she wasn't about to let her chance slip away. One of the girls added spitefully that Soo-jin should know how popular he is, and that tons of girls are waiting for a chance to date him. Soo-jin shot the girl a venomous look as she said those words. Then she lowered her voice, promising to tell her friends a little secret. And then, with a smile, Soo-jin dropped the real bombshell. At the cast dinner last month, she had kissed Dokyung. In that moment, Jiyoo's world tilted on its axis. Soo-jin admitted that he had immediately pushed her away and had been avoiding her since, but she was sure. She believed he was only avoiding her so as not to interfere with the show, and she planned to confess her feelings after the run ended. Clenching her fists, she vowed to make Dokyung hers. Jiyoo, who had heard everything, clutched the bouquet tightly. Soo-jin's friends admired her boldness, but only one thought echoed in Jiyoo's mind. So she kissed him at the cast dinner. Finding Dokyung's dressing room, she walked in decisively, announcing her arrival. He was standing with his back to her, shirtless. Seeing his powerful back, Jiyoo froze for a moment. She immediately blushed and started to protest, asking why he was walking around like that. Dokyung just chuckled, reminding her that she'd seen worse and there was no need to be shy. He found her embarrassment incredibly cute. Jiyoo handed him the bouquet to hide her face. Feeling guilty for her thoughts, she began to praise his performance, both his singing and his acting. He smiled with relief, and she quickly added that of course it was amazing. It was his show after all. He was glad to hear it, admitting that he gave it his all that day. Leaning in close, he whispered that he wanted to look good. For her. Their faces were so close that Jiyoo could feel her heart pounding wildly again. At that intimate moment, a beaming Soo-jin burst into the dressing room without knocking, eager to discuss the performance. But her smile vanished instantly when she saw the scene before her. She awkwardly mumbled that it seemed he was changing, seeing him shirtless in Jiyoo's arms. Dokyung coldly asked if he hadn't told her not to barge into his dressing room. Soo-jin apologized, saying she thought he had seen her message. Her gaze fell on Dokyung's hand, holding Jiyoo tightly. "And who's that?" she hissed. Pretending to just recognize her, Soo-jin put on a sickly sweet smile, recalling that she'd seen her in an article. She commented snidely that they seemed to be longtime friends, a fact that she found somehow annoying. Jiyoo tensed up. Soojin immediately rushed over to Jiyoo, grabbing her hands and introducing herself. She asked slyly that since Jiyoo was so close to Dogyun, if she knew what his type was, because she really liked him. Dogyun intervened sharply, telling Jiyoo not to waste her time on her and pushing the intrusive actress away. Soojin, unfazed, chirped, "See you tomorrow," and left, while Dogyun grimly told Jiyoo to go. Outside the door, Soojin's face twisted into a malicious smirk. Friend? Sure, let's go with that, she thought. An awkward silence filled the elevator. Dogyun took the bouquet from her and they both stood silently, lost in their own thoughts. Jiyoo couldn't calm down. How could he kiss another woman so passionately? Even if it was acting, why did it have to feel so much like their kiss? She was angry at herself for being jealous, but she couldn't help it. And that kiss at the dinner? He had said he liked her. Dogyun noticed her mood and asked with concern what was wrong. She muttered that it was nothing and turned away. Dogyun frowned. He could clearly see that something had been off with her ever since the dressing room incident. He offered to walk her home, and tired of arguing, she agreed, since they lived on the same floor. He asked again why his girlfriend was so upset, but Jiyoo just snapped that she was fine, trying to suppress her hurt. At her apartment door, she thanked him for the ride and told him to get some rest. But he stopped her. Dogyun gently asked her to someday tell him what had upset her so much. His concern was disarming. She was already opening her door when his name escaped her lips. Turning back, she confessed that his performance was amazing, but it really looked like he and Soojin were truly in love. The thought struck Dogyun. Was Jiyoo jealous? He stepped toward her, and she asked nervously what he was doing. He whispered that if she was going to be this cute, he couldn't hold back anymore. Before she could react, he pressed her against the wall and shut her apartment door. The bouquet fell to the floor as their lips met in a passionate kiss. He kissed her deeply and demandingly, pinning her against the door, and the world around them ceased to exist. Breaking away from his lips, Jiyoo breathed out that he was too good at kissing. And then her jealousy erupted. He must have kissed like that on stage. With Ki Soojin. An image of her rival, who was even prettier in person, flashed through her mind. Jiyoo thought that if she were a guy, she wouldn't have been able to resist a woman like that. Soojin's words about making Dogyun hers echoed in her head. Jiyoo felt a knot of anger tighten inside her. She tried to pull away, asking him to wait. She pushed him away, and he looked at her with confusion. He didn't understand why she had suddenly stopped. Looking up at him, she gathered the courage to ask the most important question. Stammering, she asked if he had kissed Soojin on stage. Just like this? Dogyun froze for a moment, realizing what this was all about. Then a sly smile touched his lips. He liked her jealousy. He wanted more of it. Jiyoo couldn't take it anymore and confessed that she hated seeing him kiss someone else, even if it was just for work. And in that moment, she leaned in and kissed him herself. Dogyun was stunned. Jiyoo had kissed him first. It was driving him crazy. He held her tightly, unwilling to let go. He growled that she was driving him insane, and their kiss grew even more ferocious. Scooping her up in his arms, he said that she was the only one he felt this way about, and that he was going to prove it to her today. After laying her on the bed, he gently stroked her cheek and said that he wasn't going to let her sleep tonight. A few days later, Jiyoo was driving through the city, but her mind was elsewhere. She was so lost in her thoughts that she nearly crashed into another car. She just couldn't get her head straight. It had been spinning for days. She scolded herself, trying to stop thinking about him. But then her phone rang, pulling her out of her reverie. The screen showed the name Jiyeon. It was her best friend. Jiyeon was calling from abroad, guessing it wasn't too late in Korea. Jiyoo replied that she was just on her way home from class. Her friend noticed a strange tone in her voice, but Jiyoo tried to laugh it off. They had been friends since middle school for 17 years, but it was still hard to tell even Jiyeon what was happening. But she had no one else to talk to. How could she explain to her friend that she was dating a top celebrity? Mustering her courage, she started vaguely, saying that she couldn't stop thinking about someone lately. Jiyeon immediately exploded with a barrage of questions. Who was he? What did he do? Was he handsome? Jiyoo began to explain that at first he was just someone she could never have imagined getting involved with. But now even just making eye contact with him made her heart flutter, and she couldn't even look at him properly. Her friend immediately asked the blunt question. Had she slept with him? Jiyoo nearly choked with indignation, but Jiyeon already knew the answer. She was like a human lie detector. her friend softened, saying she'd never seen Jiyoo so conflicted and advised her not to overthink it. She explained that this is what liking someone feels like, when your whole body tingles. And if she likes him, she should just date him. And if it felt even better after sleeping together, then that was just great. Jiyoo blushed at such talk. Jiyoo sighed and confessed that she had seen him with another girl, and it had made her so angry she couldn't even focus on work. Jiyeon immediately assumed he was a player, but Jiyoo assured her it was complicated and a secret. In the end, she decided she would tell her friend everything when she returned to Korea in a month. She hung up, wondering what Jiyeon would say when she found out the whole truth. Meanwhile, at the theater, another performance had just ended. The cast took their bows to thunderous applause. Backstage, an exhausted but satisfied Dokyun wiped sweat from his face with a towel. Soojin ran up to him, clearly wanting to talk. But something went wrong. Behind her, her friends were whispering, wondering if Dokyun had just dumped Soojin. Soojin couldn't understand why he'd do this to her, especially when he knew how she felt. At that moment, colleagues were approaching Dokyun, congratulating him on another great performance. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Watch out!" A massive stage mirror began to fall right toward the actresses. A woman's scream, the sound of shattering glass, and a spray of blood. Panicked shouts to call an ambulance filled the air. Dokyun, fighting through the pain, rasped for them not to call the medics. He tried to stand, saying he'd take the van, but his shirt was soaked with blood. Someone screamed in panic to call 119 immediately. Soon, he was being rushed to Korea University Hospital. A doctor examined Dokyun, explaining to his team that there was no concussion, but 2 of the wounds on his back were very deep and required many stitches. The doctor insisted on admitting him, but Dokyun stubbornly repeated that he was going home. His assistant Yoon-soo was horrified, but Dokyun just asked if he could leave after the IV drip. The doctor patiently explained that there was still a risk of a concussion, and the extensive wounds on his back would be difficult to dress on his own. But Dokyun, wincing in pain, sat up on the bed and said he would come back for a dressing change the next day. The first thing he did was ask Yoon-soo for his phone. He replied that he'd forgotten it in the waiting room in his haste. Dokyun grew anxious. The performance was over, and Jiyoo must have been trying to contact him. He didn't want her to find out about his injury and worry. He asked Yoon-soo to call their manager and make sure the news didn't leak to the press. Yoon-soo immediately dialed the number, explaining the situation to the manager. On the other end of the line, the manager exploded with rage, yelling at Yoon-soo for not looking after Dokyun. Stuttering with fear, Yoon-soo relayed that Dokyun was refusing to be admitted. The manager was furious, ordering him to get Dokyun admitted immediately. Yoon-soo was stammering apologies when a hand rested on his shoulder. Dokyun took the phone from him. He calmly told the manager to stop taking it out on someone who had done nothing wrong. The manager immediately turned on him, asking if he was out of his mind to block the fall with his body. The events of that evening flashed through Dokyun's mind. He had seen the mirror falling and the actresses standing beneath it. Without a second's thought, he had lunged forward and pushed Soojin out of the way. The mirror had shattered against his back, and he had collapsed to the floor. The manager sarcastically asked if he and Soojin were dating, seeing as he had saved her so heroically. Dokyun vehemently denied it, explaining that the mirror was about to fall on a group of people, and he couldn't have done otherwise. He changed the subject, asking if the article had been stopped. The manager exploded again, demanding he get hospitalized. Dokyun calmly replied that the painkillers had helped and he would rest at home. He reminded him that he was the only one cast in that role. If he couldn't perform, the show would end. The manager sighed, defeated. He promised the article wouldn't go out but ordered Dokyun to take his meds and get some sleep immediately. Dokyun smiled. The manager really did worry about him a lot. He told Yoon-soo they were heading home and Yoon-soo handed him his phone back. Yoon-soo promised to drop by in the morning and left. Left alone, Dokyun collapsed onto the bed. His back ached unbearably. He couldn't even lie down properly. He regretted not asking Yoon-soo to get his phone sooner and closed his eyes in exhaustion. At the same time, Jiyoo was in her office, dialing his number over and over again. But all she heard was that the person she was trying to reach was unavailable. She didn't understand what was happening. The performance had ended long ago. Why wasn't he calling? Her anxiety grew. Had something happened? She was angry at herself for this crazy worrying, but she couldn't help it. A colleague interrupted her thoughts, informing her that the meeting was ready. She decided to get through her work quickly and then go straight to Dokyun's place. The meeting dragged on until 11:30 p.m. She decided to stop by his place just to make sure he was home. A glance in the mirror made her gasp at her disheveled appearance. She tried to tell herself it was normal to look tired after work, but she still felt insecure. To hell with it, she decided, pulling out her makeup bag to quickly freshen up. She only meant to do a little touch-up, but ended up getting carried away. At Dogyun's apartment, the doorbell rang. He struggled to sit up in bed. At this late hour, it could only be Jiyoo. He shuffled to the door, guessing she had come because she was worried. He hadn't been able to contact her without a phone after all. He had been planning to go see her first thing in the morning anyway. Opening the door, he was about to ask why she was ringing, but it wasn't Jiyoo on his doorstep. His face hardened. "You," he hissed. Soojin was standing there. She smiled and asked how he was feeling. She reminded him that he had protected her from the falling mirror. Soojin said she had been so worried and had brought him some fruit. Dogyun coldly replied that it wasn't because of her, so there was no need for thanks. He asked bluntly what she was doing there at this hour. Soojin mentally admired how sexy he was, even when angry. She declared that she had come so late on purpose to confess her feelings to him. Dogyun sighed wearily. He didn't even have the energy to be angry. He said he needed to rest and told her to go home, but she wouldn't give up. He refused to take the fruit again, but she suddenly threw her arms around his neck. She pressed her lips to his, begging to stay the night in his arms. Just at that moment, Jiyoo, having finished her touch-ups, stepped out of the elevator. She walked confidently toward his apartment. After all, they were dating now. The fruit basket fell to the floor as Soojin stood on her toes to deepen the kiss. She demanded that he open his mouth. The pressure on his back made his wounds ache again. His eyes flashed with pain and anger. He shoved her away from him forcefully. Gasping for breath, he asked what she thought she was doing. Soojin, adjusting her clothes, asked if he was crazy. She scanned his luxurious penthouse. Every piece of decor screamed wealth. She knew he was rich, but she hadn't expected such stunning luxury. Dogyun cut through her thoughts, addressing her coldly by her full name. He asked if she thought he was joking and what he had to do to get through to her. Soojin smiled and said she understood, but she just couldn't give up on him. And if he really didn't want to date her, then she wanted to sleep with him, just once. With those words, she unzipped her dress and stood before him in her lingerie. She promised he wouldn't have to do anything. She would take care of it all. "Just once, please," she begged, touching his bandaged chest. Dogyun gritted his teeth. Damn it. He hissed that he must have been too soft on her. He grabbed her arm roughly and dragged her toward the exit. He threw her out of the apartment, and she fell to the floor with a cry. His face was a mask of fury. He gave her one final warning. He told her he had a girlfriend, and no matter how trashy Soojin acted, she wouldn't even register in his eyes. Then he ordered her to get out. As Soojin got up from the floor, she muttered how annoying this was. She had come here to confirm if he was gay, since he gave no one a chance, and it turned out he had a girlfriend. Looking up, she saw Jiyoo. "Who is she?" flashed through her mind. Soojin immediately put on a friendly facade, guessing that Jiyoo must be Dogyun's friend. Jiyoo coldly retorted that was her line, asking what Soojin was doing here. This was her house. The smile vanished from Soojin's face. She was stunned. A wave of irritation washed over her, but she only asked aloud if Jiyoo really lived here. Jiyoo confirmed. Soojin said she just stopped by to check on Dogyun, to which Jiyoo asked in confusion what she was talking about. With a venomous smile, Soojin feigned surprise at Jiyoo's ignorance. She regretfully informed her that Dogyun had gotten hurt protecting her from a falling mirror. Hearing that Dogyun was injured, Jiyoo froze in shock. Soojin continued her lie, saying she was fine, but Dogyun had ended up in the ER. She claimed she wanted to stay with him, but he had insisted she go home. It all clicked for Jiyoo. That's why he hadn't called, why she couldn't reach him. But a seed of resentment was planted in her heart. Why did she have to hear about this from someone else? Soojin decided to deliver the final blow. She declared that since he had risked himself to save her, it must mean he had feelings for her too. Jiyoo's eyes widened with fury. She told Soojin in an icy tone that she was very tired. Soojin, feigning concern, apologized and, wishing her good night, left. Once inside her waiting van, she dropped the act. A triumphant, malicious smile spread across her face. She was certain this friend was in love with Dogyun, and a little provocation had set her off. Remembering Dogyun's words about having a girlfriend, she realized it was her. And they were living together in the same penthouse. She asked the driver, Hyun-woo, if he got a good shot. Soojin demanded he give her the phone. On the screen was a photo of her leaving Dogyun's apartment. "Nice job," she praised, taking the phone. She immediately dialed the number of a reporter she knew. Introducing herself, she reminded him that he had asked about any good news. And she had a scoop for him. Dokyun had been injured during today's performance. She blamed him for everything. He should have at least looked at her. He got hurt protecting her. Inside the apartment, Dokyun saw that Jiyoo was still standing by the door. He called her name. They just looked at each other in silence. Sujin's words echoed in Jiyoo's mind. So, it was true, she thought, and asked if someone had just been there. She said she was just coming in for a second. She walked past him into the apartment and saw the discarded fruit basket on the floor. She picked up the basket. A fruit basket, playing the part of a concerned visitor, Jiyoo thought with a bitter smile. She knew that coming over so late in that outfit could only mean one thing. As she turned to leave, Dokyun stopped her, placing a hand on her shoulder. He asked with concern if something had happened. She violently shook his hand off, shouting at him not to touch her. The sudden movement made his wound ache. She turned to him full of anger and demanded to know what happened to his body. Her voice trembled with hurt. If he was this injured, the least he could have done was let her know. She yelled that she had called him all day, going crazy with worry, not knowing what to think. She threw his own words back at him, reminding him they were dating. So why did she have to hear about his injury from another woman? Dokyun realized she must have run into Sujin. Damn it, what the hell did she tell her? With tears in her eyes, Jiyoo asked why he even told her he liked her if this was how it was going to be. She cried, saying they should have just stayed friends. Dokyun watched her tears, his heart aching. He stepped toward her. Grabbing her by the shoulders, he promised to explain everything. He told her that he was rushed to the hospital after the injury and had forgotten his phone in the chaos. He admitted he didn't call on purpose because he didn't want her to worry. He had blocked all the news so she wouldn't find out, and had planned to come see her in the morning, acting like nothing had happened. He apologized for not being able to tell her, not realizing it would upset her this much. But Jiyoo cut him off, asking why Sujin was leaving his house in the middle of the night. When he heard Jiyoo thought he got hurt saving Sujin, Dokyun exploded. What? No, absolutely not. He explained that a huge mirror was falling towards several people, and he had reacted instinctively. Thankfully, no one else was hurt, but he had injured his back a bit. Jiyoo asked frantically how bad it was. He tried to reassure her, saying it was nothing serious. He repeated that it wasn't because of her. And then he just pulled her close and held her tight. He buried his face in her hair, begging her to ask him anything, promising to explain everything. He whispered that there was no one else for him but her. Jiyoo hugged him back, but a sense of unease still lingered in her heart. She didn't know if she could fully believe him, but she decided she wanted to try to trust him. She gently returned his embrace. Gathering her thoughts, she said that she had overheard something at the performance that day. Dokyun gritted his teeth. Damn it, Ki Sujin. He immediately told her the truth about the kiss at the dinner. She had followed him to the bathroom and kissed him suddenly. He explained that she had been chasing him for a while, and he hadn't told Jiyoo to avoid worrying her. He had been ignoring her antics for the sake of the show, but it had been difficult. He apologized for letting the situation bother her and gently stroked her head. He promised nothing like that would happen again and that he wouldn't make her worry. But Jiyoo was still pouting. She declared that she was still mad and told him not to even say her name. She said she was leaving and stood up. Dokyun pleaded with her to stay, apologizing again and again. She waved him off, saying she hadn't even showered since work, but he caught her. He pulled her onto his lap, promising to make it up to her and asking her not to go. He kissed her cheek gently and she shyly murmured his name. Suddenly, she jumped up and sternly ordered him to get dressed. They were going to the hospital. Dokyun didn't understand what was wrong, but then she pointed to his back. His wound had reopened and the bandage was soaked with blood. At the hospital, the doctor sighed in exasperation. The wound had completely reopened after all that stitching. He scolded Dokyun for moving around so carelessly and again insisted on hospitalization. But Dokyun refused. The doctor lectured him like a small child, and he apologized sheepishly. The doctor asked if he had taken his antibiotics, and Dokyun realized he had forgotten while sleeping. The doctor patiently explained that if the wound didn't heal, an infection could set in, and then hospitalization would be unavoidable. He strictly told him to be cautious. Jiyoo, standing nearby, felt like she was being scolded too. The nurse finished dressing the wound. The doctor allowed them to leave, but asked him one last time not to reopen the wound again. After leaving the room, Jiyoo admitted she had been scared. Dokyun apologized, saying he hadn't realized how bad it was. Just then, the nurse approached them. She turned out to be a fan of Dogyun and asked for an autograph. Jiyoo smiled to herself, thinking, the life of a top star. They returned to the car. Jiyoo told him to go upstairs and rest. But then Dogyun said plaintively that he was hungry. Jiyoo gave him a reproachful look. Of course he was hungry. He hadn't eaten or taken his medicine all day. He put on the most pitiful face he could manage and said he had no appetite because of the pain. He added that the nurse had told him to be sure to take his medicine. That pathetic look worked on Jiyoo like a charm. She sighed and told him to eat, and then she would go. Dogyun's mission was accomplished. A generous dinner was laid out on the table. Dogyun, already digging in, teased Jiyoo, saying it was no wonder he got hurt if it meant she'd take such good care of him now. Jiyoo, having just finished washing up, sat down at the table. She explained it was just some side dishes her mom had made and told him to just eat quietly. But the taste of the food brought back warm memories for Dogyun. He smiled, saying it reminded him of their school days when her mom would often cook for him, and that her cooking was still amazing. His memory helpfully served up a scene from the past, a much younger him carrying a sick Jiyoo on his back. Her mom met them at the door, crying out in surprise and concern. The girl had insisted she was fine and stubbornly went to school, but she ended up getting worse. Jiyoo's mother warmly thanked Dogyun for bringing her daughter home. Since he was there, she insisted he stay and eat before leaving. She immediately rushed to the kitchen to set the table, ignoring his polite refusals. The woman explained that he wouldn't make it in time for school lunch anyway, so he should eat. Embarrassed but grateful, Dogyun agreed. He picked up a piece of fried tofu with his chopsticks. One bite took him right back to that moment. The taste was simply incredible, and his face lit up with genuine pleasure. Back in the present, Dogyun fondly admitted that he still sometimes remembered the taste of that tofu. Jiyoo was amazed he remembered it after so many years. Dogyun replied that of course he did. He thought of it every time they served tasteless tofu in the army. Touched by his words, Jiyoo immediately jumped up to get him more. Dogyun laughed and thanked her for her care. She noted with surprise how much he must have been craving it. He jokingly complained that if he ate this much, his abs would disappear. Jiyoo gave him a skeptical look, remarking that his abs looked pretty solid to her. And then came the provocative offer. With a sly grin, Dogyun lifted his shirt, showing off his perfect abs, and asked if she wanted to check for herself. Jiyoo blushed to the tips of her ears. This man was simply unbearable. She scolded him for falling back into his old habits again, but Dogyun simply pressed his hands against the bump on his head. She gently changed the subject, reminding him about the medicine the doctor prescribed. It was time to get some rest. Dogyun took her hand, but Jiyoo started to pull away, complaining that she was full and sleepy. And once again, he deployed his killer tactic. Making the most pitiful face, he asked if she would put him to sleep if he took his medicine, because he was in pain and couldn't sleep alone. Jiyoo froze, her heart skipping a beat. She stood no chance against that look. The next moment, they were lying in bed, separated by a safe distance. Jiyoo mentally cursed herself, realizing she had fallen for his trick again. That expression was her ultimate weakness. Dogyun suggested they cuddle and sleep, but she pretended not to understand. So he simply pulled her to him, commanding her to come here. He gently wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Jiyoo was stunned by the sudden intimacy. She immediately grew worried, reminding him to be careful with his injured back and to move back a little. Dogyun only held her tighter, whispering that she had made him worry all day. He chided her for being so tense. Her hand touched his bandaged chest, and she thought with a pang of sorrow how much it must hurt. Suddenly, Dogyun hugged her tightly, pressing her body against his. Dogyun whispered in her ear how nice it was to be with her like this, and that he wished they had started dating sooner. A flustered Jiyoo asked him not to say such things. She thought he must just be tired after his injury and craving affection. But then she felt his hot breath on her neck. He was breathing heavily, whispering her name. Jiyoo asked in a panic what he was doing, noticing his strange breathing. He ignored her question, instead burying his nose in her neck and whispering how good she smelled. His touch burned her skin. She indignantly demanded he stop, comparing him to a puppy sniffing everything. Dogyun asked her to hold still. Jiyoo froze, but then immediately worried she might have hurt his wound. She asked worriedly if she had hurt him, but he replied that wasn't it. The next second, she felt something hard press against her thigh. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She muttered his name in shock. If he had this much energy, he should go back to his own side. But Dogyun stopped her. He rolled over, hovering above her and gently pinning her hands. Their eyes met. The tension in the room became almost palpable. He slowly leaned down and their lips met in a gentle kiss. Jiyoo desperately tried to stay sane. She told herself this was wrong, that he was injured. She tried to pull away, murmuring that she couldn't right now, because his body... But Dokyung cut her off, clarifying that the injury was on his back, not his waist. He assured her that his back was perfectly fine. A spark ignited in his eyes, and he suggested an alternative. In one smooth motion, he sat her on his lap, face to face. Jiyoo gasped at the unexpected and bold move. Before she could recover, he crushed his lips against hers again, this time far more passionately and demandingly. She closed her eyes, surrendering completely to the moment. Dokyung woke up the next morning to the bright rays of the sun. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Jiyoo had fallen asleep right on his lap. He smiled, remembering they had spent the night together. He thought lovingly how cute she was when she slept. Waking up and seeing her next to him, this was pure bliss. He chuckled, remembering she was always like this, completely defenseless whenever he was hurting. She had always been there for him during the toughest times of his life. Whenever he was in pain, she was there, even back then. The memories took him back 4 years. News headlines screamed about the tragedy. Kim Dokyung, a former idol, had been seriously injured during his first solo concert when the stage collapsed. He was drifting in and out of consciousness in a fog of pain and voices. Someone's screams, noise, drowsiness. And then, a familiar voice calling his name. He tried to figure out who was calling him, who was begging him to wake up. Opening his eyes, he saw Jiyoo's tear-streaked face. She was desperately asking if he was okay. Dokyung, still weak, could only ask why she was crying. While his manager ran to get a doctor, Jiyoo kept crying, lamenting how badly he was hurt. He weakly reached out and squeezed her hand, begging her not to cry. Looking up at her from the hospital bed, his leg in a cast, he tried to reassure her, insisting he was fine. Lying in the hospital room, he worried about the fans who must have been in shock. A message from his mother with the agency's official statement popped up on his phone. He decided to post on the fan cafe to reassure his fans. His parents were worried too, feeling guilty that he was alone in Korea. Suddenly, the door to his room opened and Jiyoo appeared with huge bags. He was shocked. He asked in surprise why she wasn't at work and what was with all the bags. With a radiant smile, she announced that from now on she'd be commuting from here. Dokyung was bewildered. He reminded her it was a long way to her academy and that her schedule was so tight she'd even rented a studio closer to work. Jiyoo replied seriously that he was now a patient with a broken leg who couldn't even walk alone. How could she leave him alone for 3 weeks? She reminded him that his aunt and uncle were also in Canada. Dokyung tried to argue that he had a caregiver, but Jiyoo cut him off, saying the caregiver only came during the day. He kept insisting he was fine and that Yoonsu visited him sometimes. But his eyes were filled with gratitude. Dokyung looked around the uncomfortable hospital room, but Jiyoo countered that the bed wasn't the problem. He didn't want her, busy as she was, to waste over an hour commuting because of him. He tried to tell her she didn't have to do this. But Jiyoo was no longer listening. She opened the fridge, announcing that her mom had just made a bunch of side dishes. Dokyung asked if she was ignoring him. That evening, they had dinner together. Dokyung claimed the hospital food was good enough, but Jiyoo insisted that eating the same thing gets boring. In the end, Dokyung gave in to her stubbornness. He thanked her and started eating. Dokyung remarked that it had been a while since they'd spent time together so comfortably. Even before they broke up, they had been cautious about contact. The mention of a breakup made Dokyung think of her ex, Kim Chan-hee. He remembered how Chan-hee had chased her in college and then cheated, blaming his own insecurity. Dokyung got so angry at the memory that he gripped his chopsticks tightly. When Jiyoo asked what was wrong, he lied that the food was just really delicious. Jiyoo told him about her first online lecture, how nervous she was in front of the camera, and how her voice trembled. She asked if he got nervous in front of the camera. Dokyung replied with a confident smile that he was used to it after years of work, radiating a true celebrity vibe. He wondered if she had dressed up today because of the recording. She coquettishly fixed her hair and asked if she looked pretty. Dokyung deadpanned. "No way." Jiyoo burst out laughing at his reaction. She complained that it had been so long since she'd dressed up that everything went wrong, and she even burned her hand with a curling iron that morning. Hearing this, Dokyung immediately turned serious. He abruptly grabbed her hand, demanding to see the burn. He examined her palm with concern and asked if she had put any ointment on it. Jiyoo admitted sheepishly that she had been too busy. Dokyung sighed heavily, got up on his crutches, and told her to wait. He headed for the door, leaving a puzzled Jiyoo behind. A moment later, he returned with ointment and bandages he had borrowed from the nurses. He began to gently treat her burn. Jiyoo flinched in pain. Dokyung asked her to bear with it and continued with extreme care. When he was done, Jiyoo said with relief that it felt much better. She started to thank him, but the words got stuck in her throat. He leaned in so close she could feel his breath. Their eyes met, and the air between them crackled. Jiyoo's heart pounded. She thought they were way too close. Startled by the proximity, she jerked back and accidentally hit her head. She cried out in pain, rubbing her bruised forehead. Dokyung smirked and told her to take care of herself instead of him. Jiyoo pouted, muttering that his comment hurt even more. She blushed, trying to convince herself she had just misunderstood. After all, Dokyung was just a friend. Glancing at the clock, she saw it was already 9. She offered to help him shower with his cast. She explained it would be hard for him to wash himself and he might slip. After a moment's thought, Dokyung asked her to help him wash his hair. In the bathroom, she carefully rinsed the shampoo from his hair. Dokyung let out a sigh of relief, saying he felt much better. He had taken off his clothes to keep them from getting wet. Jiyoo told him to go dry his hair, but he asked in surprise, "Just me?" She cheerfully replied that she needed to wash up too, holding up her wash bag. Dokyung silently walked out, leaving her in the bathroom. He reasoned that it was no big deal. They had stayed over at each other's places before, so a shower was nothing. Sitting on the bed, he waited for her, trying to convince himself everything was normal. But doubts plagued him. Wasn't she being a little too comfortable around him? She didn't even flinch when she saw him shirtless. Or maybe he was the one overthinking everything? After all, they had been friends since middle school. Even when they got drunk together, nothing ever happened. They were just genuinely good friends. He decided to push the thoughts away and just read a book. He chided himself for having strange thoughts. She had just rushed over because her friend got hurt. At that moment, Jiyoo walked out of the bathroom, enjoying the cool air. Dokyung's head snapped up and his face flushed. He mentally ordered himself to get it together. She emerged wearing his t-shirt, drying her hair with a towel. Her damp, relaxed appearance made his heart race. She asked where the hairdryer was, and her smile completely undid him. While he sat on the bed trying to hide his face behind a book, she settled on the adjacent cot with her laptop. She was preparing for the next day's classes, and his heart just wouldn't calm down. He scolded himself, wondering what was wrong with him. He wasn't a kid. His ears were burning with embarrassment. He had carried her on his back, hugged her when she was sick, and it meant nothing. But seeing her in pajamas? Why was his heart pounding like this? He couldn't understand what was happening to him. He wondered if he'd been single for too long. Why was he developing these feelings for Jiyoo? What if this strange feeling ruined their friendship? He decided to just pretend he didn't notice anything. She had stayed by his side when he was sick and alone. He was probably just touched by her kindness. He kept making pathetic excuses for himself until he noticed the room had gone suspiciously quiet. Lowering his book, he saw that Jiyoo had fallen asleep while working. He quietly approached her, looking tenderly at her peaceful face. He gently woke her, telling her that if she was going to sleep, she should do it comfortably. He advised her not to overwork herself and to go home and rest. He knew she always gave her all, and he could only imagine how hard she was preparing. He gently touched her cheek. She murmured his name in her sleep. His heart raced again. He decided to check something. He wanted to see if this fluttering feeling was just temporary. Dokyung slowly leaned in and gave her a light, almost weightless kiss. He touched his own lips, feeling her warmth. He was losing it. This feeling was too strong. This was their first kiss, one that only he remembered. The feelings that started then he had hidden for a long time. He had been prepared for the day they would no longer be just friends, but he never thought they'd start dating because of a pact made when they were 20. The thought of how he seduced her in 10 minutes still made him feel embarrassed. The next morning, he was drying her hair with a hairdryer. When he finished, he looked at her reflection in the mirror. She thanked him, saying that drying long hair was a real pain. Suddenly, he hugged her from behind, nuzzling her neck. She flinched and asked what he was doing so early in the morning. He replied that he just felt good. Really good. She asked shyly what was so good about him drying her hair for half an hour. He whispered that everything, waking up next to her, getting ready together in the morning, he loved all of it. He confessed sincerely that he really liked her. Her heart skipped a beat at his words. Flustered, she quickly changed the subject, reminding him about his medicine and breakfast. At breakfast, he asked if she only had one class in the afternoon. She wondered how he always knew everything. He replied mysteriously that he had his ways and offered to drive her. He had memorized her entire schedule. She grew concerned, knowing he had a performance that evening and his back still hurt. But he assured her it was fine. He suddenly remembered that his manager, Yoon-soo, was supposed to come that morning. Jiyoo exclaimed in a panic that it was almost noon and told him to get dressed quickly. Stepping into the hallway, they saw Yoon-soo talking frantically on the phone. When he saw them, he cried out in horror that they were in big trouble. Dokyun calmly asked what had happened. Yoon-soo blurted out that the internet was flooded with scandalous articles about him and Ki Soo-jin. There were reports that he got hurt saving her, and even photos of her entering his apartment the previous night. It dawned on Dokyun. Did she intentionally come over at night to set up this scandal? Yoon-soo reported that the agency had issued a denial, but he was being summoned to the office for an urgent meeting. Dokyun turned to Jiyoo. He apologized that he couldn't drive her, as he had to rush to the office. Jiyoo assured him it was fine and told him to hurry. He squeezed her hand goodbye, promising to contact her later. On the way to the agency, Dokyun saw the article's headline on his phone: Kim Dokyung and Ki Soo-jin, from musical lovers to real-life romance. He clenched his phone in anger. He had clearly said that was the final warning. He hadn't thought she would be this reckless. At the office, his manager reported that Soo-jin herself had likely leaked the article, and her agency refused to intervene, calling it her private life. The manager asked anxiously if Dokyun was going to quit. He replied, "Of course not." He had endured all this just to finish the performance. With a cold glint in his eyes, he declared that he would make Ki Soo-jin leave on her own terms. Meanwhile, Jiyoo finished her class, encouraging her students. Walking into the hallway, she heard students discussing the rumors about Dokyun and Soo-jin. The whole academy was buzzing. She remembered how Dokyun had given her a choice: to announce she was his girlfriend or to say they were just friends. She was glad they had agreed to keep it a secret back then. Even with the denial, there was so much fuss. It was terrifying to imagine what would have happened if they had gone public. The students kept gossiping, saying that since there were photos, something must have happened between them. They reasoned that with a face like Dokyun's, it was hard to believe he was single. Her colleagues greeted Jiyoo, thanking her for her hard work. The other teachers suggested heading straight to the restaurant for the company dinner. Jiyoo was puzzled. They reminded her that Teacher Young had booked a Japanese restaurant. Jiyoo slapped her forehead. She had completely forgotten about the academy dinner. This dinner was held once a quarter and usually lasted until the early morning. She had been so preoccupied with Dokyun's situation that it had completely slipped her mind. She smiled and agreed to go. At that moment, Dokyun was taking a bow after another successful performance. Backstage, he walked to his dressing room, breathing heavily. A staff member asked with concern if he was all right. He assured her he was fine and checked if any blood had gotten on the costume. He took out his phone, noting to himself that he had wrapped the wound tightly. He scrolled through social media, thinking that Jiyoo must be curious about his relationship with Soo-jin. The fans were praising his performance. He thought with relief that the show had gone well. Just then, a message from Jiyoo arrived. She wrote that she had completely forgotten about the dinner and apologized with a bunny emoji. He smiled, thinking she used emojis that looked just like her. He thought to himself how cute she was. He immediately typed a reply, offering to pick her up when she was done. Just as he sent the message, his dressing room door flew open and Soo-jin stood on the threshold. She demanded to talk to him, her face contorted with anger. Dokyun calmly asked his manager and the rest of the staff to step out for a moment. He asked her directly if she had ordered the article. Soo-jin defiantly confirmed it, saying she wanted everyone to know he was taken. He coldly replied that rumors and photos wouldn't change anything. He would never be with her, but she stubbornly insisted she wouldn't give up. Dokyun took out his phone. Soo-jin didn't understand what was happening. He played her a recording from his security camera, which showed her forcing her way into his apartment, begging to stay the night. He explained that such incidents weren't uncommon in his industry, so he had installed a camera at his front door, mainly because of stalker fans. He said he had held back until now to avoid affecting the show. But now, if she tried anything else, he would release the footage and file a lawsuit through his agency. In an icy tone, he told her to stop and never come near him again after the show ended. Her world shattered. She grabbed his arm, asking why he was going so far, claiming she did it all for love. But he cut her off, saying she had crossed the line. With tears in her eyes, she asked if he loved that woman he called a friend. She hissed venomously that they would see how long their relationship lasts. She ran out of the dressing room, leaving him alone. Dokyun sighed heavily. His thoughts were only of Jiyoo. Meanwhile, at the dinner party, Jiyoo was giving a toast, thanking her colleagues for their work. Everyone cheerfully clinked their glasses, enjoying the evening. Her colleagues praised the food, and Jiyoo was glad she could relax after a stressful day. She encouraged them to eat, while planning to give them her card and slip out soon. She wondered if she should ask Dokyun to pick her up around 1 a.m. Suddenly, a colleague asked her about Dokyun, since they were friends. She asked curiously if they were really not dating. Jiyoo assured everyone with a nervous smile that Dokyun wasn't seeing anyone. Her colleagues continued to speculate that he might date an actress or a chaebol heiress, but definitely not an ordinary girl. Jiyoo was inwardly indignant, wondering what was wrong with being ordinary, but she couldn't say anything out loud. At that moment, Teacher Yoon handed her a hangover remedy. She thanked him, flustered. His face turned red and his heart pounded. While the other teachers discussed work, Jiyoo glanced at the time. It was already past 1 a.m. and she decided it was time to leave. She announced her departure, but her colleagues were surprised she was leaving so early. She explained it wasn't proper for the director to stay until the very end, left her card for the bill, and wished them a good time. Stepping outside, she took out her phone to text Dokyun. Suddenly, Teacher Yoon called out to her. He caught up with her at the exit. He offered to drive her home, saying he had purposely not drunk so he could take her home safely. Jiyoo laughed, saying she didn't need that kind of blatant favoritism. She assured him she was fine, but he stopped her, saying he wanted to talk to her in private. Suddenly, a car pulled up beside them. Dokyun got out of the car, taking off his mask. He smiled and said he had come to pick her up. Jiyoo happily rushed towards him, while Teacher Yoon stood in complete shock. She asked when he arrived, while Yoon couldn't believe his eyes. Dokyun replied that he had just gotten there. Yoon thought they were just friends, but he was struck by the idol's handsomeness. Jiyoo introduced them. Teacher Yoon was also stunned by Dokyun's height. Yoon Jihoo extended his hand for a handshake. Dokyun gripped it with such force that the man almost cried out. With a predatory smile, Dokyun introduced himself as Jiyoo's friend. Yoon Jihoo felt awkward, not understanding what he had done wrong. Jiyoo also didn't understand the tension in the air. Yoon asked Dokyun what he was doing there. He explained that he came to pick up Jiyoo since they lived in the same building. Jiyoo asked how his back was, and Dokyun replied that it didn't hurt. Yoon wondered if friends really picked each other up at this hour, even if they lived in the same building. He felt like he had missed something. Dokyun told Jiyoo it was time for them to go. Getting into the car, Jiyoo said goodbye to Teacher Yoon. He wished her a safe trip home, and the car drove off. An awkward silence filled the car. Jiyoo noticed that Dokyun looked angry. She thought he had been cold to Teacher Yoon, which was unlike him. Maybe he misunderstood something? But then she remembered how perceptive Dokyun was. He must have noticed Yoon's interest in her. She started to explain who Teacher Yoon was, but Dokyun interrupted her with an apology. He admitted that he had almost created an awkward situation for her and couldn't hide his displeasure. He said that in public they were just friends, and he should have been more careful. But he couldn't help it because it was obvious that Guy was into her. Jiyoo was touched by his jealousy. She remembered hearing gossip about him and Soojin all day. It hurt so much to hear her colleagues ask if they were really not dating. It was unbearable, and not just today. She remembered the day of the performance when she saw them backstage. And in front of Dokyun's house when Soojin was blatantly hitting on him. She couldn't tell her to back off from her boyfriend. She looked at Dokyun and realized he must have felt the same way. She took a deep breath and said she had something to tell him. She asked if it was time for them to go public with their relationship. To her utter shock, he firmly said no. She had been so sure he would agree immediately. She asked if he was worried about his career. He replied that he wasn't worried about himself. He explained that if people found out she was dating a celebrity, it would be bad for her image as a teacher. But Jiyoo declared that gossip wouldn't shake her professionalism. Dokyun agreed with a smile that she was very capable. He said he had wanted to go public too, but after the recent scandal, he'd changed his mind. He explained that if people found out about them, things would get much harder than she thought. She would hear a lot of nasty things from anonymous haters. False rumors would spread like facts, accusing her of things she never did. He didn't want her name dragged through the mud because of him. He was used to it after 10 years, but she wasn't. He didn't want her to suffer because of articles, comments, hate, and misunderstandings. She asked if he was sure it wasn't about his popularity. He replied that he never doubted her. Then Jiyoo declared that she was ready to take it all on. His eyes widened in surprise. She said she had thought about it a lot. It was frustrating not being able to say anything while everyone talked about him. But more than that, it upset her that he was more worried about her than himself. It made her want to shout to the world that she was his girlfriend. His expression softened. He looked at her seriously and said, "Then say it. Be mine. Just don't take it back later." Under the full moon, she quietly promised she wouldn't. Memories of that night blended with the present. She was in the shower with him, complaining that he promised not to get his back wet. He pulled her close under the stream of water, and she cried out. Their lips met in a passionate kiss. Sometime later, Jiyoo was driving, talking to Dokyung on the phone. She asked if he would be home late tonight. He said not too late, but she should go to sleep if she was tired. He had a lot to take care of before his album release to minimize the backlash when their relationship news came out. Dokyung's musical had successfully concluded. At the after-party, his colleagues congratulated him, but Soojin was not there. Instead, she sent him a message saying she still loved him and would wait. Without a second thought, Dokyung blocked her number. Since Dokyung had an album release and a concert scheduled, they decided to discuss the right time to announce their relationship with the company. They said their sweet goodbyes, wishing each other a productive day and a good rest. Jiyoo arrived at the broadcasting station building. She was a bit early and decided to grab a coffee at the cafe on the first floor. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to her. The unpleasant voice sent a chill down her spine. It was Kim Chan-hee, her ex-boyfriend. During the filming in the studio, the teachers observed the students. Jiyoo couldn't shake off a bad feeling. She hoped running into him was just a coincidence. She pointedly ignored him, but he kept calling her name. During the shoot, an assistant brought her the script. She also informed her that the program's producer had changed, and the new producer was Kim Chan-hee. Jiyoo mentally explained who he was, her ex-boyfriend. And not just any ex, but the disgusting kind, the so-called trash ex. She remembered how he had persistently pursued her in university. She had rejected him several times, but he didn't give up and confessed a third time. He pleaded with her, promising to treat her well. In the end, she gave in to his persistence and accepted his confession. She wanted to be a good girlfriend to him, but once the relationship started, everything changed. He was job hunting while she started working as a lecturer with a good income right after graduation. She paid for their dates and supported him, buying him clothes and other gifts. Instead of gratitude, he was filled with jealousy and hatred. She didn't understand why he suddenly became cold to her. She attributed it to the stress of his job search. Eventually, after many failures, he got a job at a broadcasting station. When she celebrated his success, he acted modest, but a smug smile played on his lips. Wearing his employee ID, he secretly went on blind dates and eventually got involved with the daughter of a major food company's owner. One day, he suddenly announced he wanted to break up. Her heart was broken. His words hurt her unbearably. He claimed that men preferred gentle and kind women, not those who intimidate them. After they broke up, she threw herself into her work. But a few months ago, he had called to tell her he was getting married. Back in the present, Jiyoo was seething. Just the sight of that bastard made her sick. She wondered if she should continue with the show, enduring his presence. She was doing it for the students, not the money. During a meeting, Chan-hee started praising her talents, highlighting her success at the academy and on TV. Other colleagues joined in, remarking how difficult it is to become a top instructor. Jiyoo was baffled. Was this the same guy who said he felt intimidated by her talent? She couldn't figure out what game he was playing. After filming, she hurried home, but he caught up with her in the parking lot. She confronted him, asking what he was trying to do. She demanded he stop acting like they were close. He proudly declared that he had applied for this program because he heard she would be on it. He explained that he wanted to contact her, but she had blocked him, so he found another way. Jiyoo clenched her fists, thinking she should just quit the show. She sarcastically asked if marriage had changed his personality. And now what? Was she supposed to be grateful for his apology? Or for the fact that he had cheated on her? He started pleading with her to give him one more chance. He dropped a bombshell. He was getting divorced and wanted to get back together with her. The next morning, Jiyoo woke up at home, struggling to remember how she got back from the studio. She remembered her furious response. She had called him trash and said she didn't care if he got divorced or not. It was the worst relationship of her life, one she wished she could erase from her memory. The pain of his betrayal had lasted for a very long time. She wouldn't have survived if it weren't for Dokyung, who was there to comfort her and promised to kill that bastard. She felt embarrassed remembering how much she had relied on him back then. At that moment, her phone rang. It was Dokyung. He heard his name on the line and asked if she was home. She confirmed, and he told her he had been at the recording studio and had also visited the hospital. She was happy for him, lying on her couch. He noticed a strange tone in her voice and asked what had happened. She started to tell him about her encounter at the station, but was interrupted by a voice in the background calling for Dokyung. It was the director calling for him. He apologized and asked what she was saying. Jiyoo lied that it was nothing, just wishing him well. Jiyoo decided not to tell him anything. If he found out Chan-hee was back, he would worry and get angry. She wanted him to focus on his work, especially since they were planning to go public with their relationship. She decided to tell him later. In the end, filming began, and she hadn't said anything to Dokyung. On the show, they were analyzing the study methods of a student named Choi Nareen. Jiyoo suggested the problem was that the student only solved problems without reviewing the concepts. The student shyly confirmed, admitting she didn't know how to study properly. Meanwhile, off-camera, Chan-hee was lost in his own thoughts. His wife had ignored his talk of divorce. He nervously bit his lip, thinking that Jiyoo shouldn't be acting this way. The shoot dragged on for 6 hours. Jiyoo was exhausted. Everyone except the crew looked like zombies. Chan-hee was deliberately dragging out the process. Deciding to go home, she headed for the exit, but he grabbed her arm. She demanded he let her go, but he dragged her along. He roughly pushed her against a wall. He asked if she was still upset and started apologizing for the past again. When he tried to suggest they get back together, she stomped on his foot with all her might. She called him a crazy bastard. Brushing the dust off herself, she suddenly understood his motive. He sneered, declaring that she was seeing Kim Dokyung. He had seen the news article about them being old friends and figured it wasn't true. He was convinced she was treating him this way only because of Dokyung. He began to threaten her, saying he would call a reporter and reveal that Dokyung's lover was an ordinary person. He persisted, reminding her that she had said no before, but they still ended up dating. Jiyoo thought with disgust that it was the mistake of her lifetime. He smugly declared that he was ready to do it all over again, and in the end, she would be his. As she drove away, Jiyoo felt that something was definitely off. Chan-hee had always been irrational, but he usually backed off after such insults. His persistence was linked to Dokyung. If he had really known the truth, he would have made an even bigger scene. She remembered how he had always hated Dokyung, throwing baseless jealousy fits. He would yell that friendship between a man and a woman doesn't exist and accuse her of meeting him in secret. Even when they were dating, he constantly picked fights over Dokyung. Jiyoo concluded that he was mentally unstable and she would no longer engage with him. She seriously considered quitting the show. He shared that his album recording was going great, and thinking about her helped him capture the emotion. She smiled, saying she was jealous of Yoon-soo for getting to hear it. He promised to play it for her later. She thought it was a good thing she hadn't told him anything. Meanwhile, Chan-hee was with another woman who was asking him to be gentle. He rudely told her to just bear with it. He remembered how his wife had caught him with his mistress the day she found out she was pregnant. He had begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. She had screamed that they were getting a divorce and threatened to sue, taking everything from him. She reminded him of her family's power, and that's when he decided that if he married Jiyoo, everything would be fixed. She made a ridiculous amount of money, and he wouldn't have to feel inferior. After his call with Jiyoo, Dokyung hung up. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with her voice. Several more filming sessions passed. Chan-hee continued his attempts to get close. He offered to have a meal with her, but she said she was busy. He brought her coffee, but she yelled that she didn't drink it. She had learned to ignore his constant advances. One evening, drinking a beer at home, she angrily crushed the can. He used to lurk in the parking lot, and now he was hitting on her openly. His audacity had become so obvious that others were starting to notice. Even the writer seemed to suspect something. But she never said anything. Jiyoo sighed. This was all so exhausting. She suddenly realized it was the first time she was drinking beer alone since that day. That day, because of Chan-hee, she had hurt her hand, gotten drunk, and kissed Dokyung. She blushed at the memory and decided to just keep drinking. She dozed off on the couch and woke up with a start. Opening her eyes, she saw Dokyung holding her in his arms. He said he had just arrived and found her asleep on the couch. She asked him to put her down, but he carried her to the bed, saying he would do it gently. He carefully laid her down on the bed. He was about to leave, but she grabbed his shirt. She whispered for him not to go. She wanted to complain to him like a child. She asked him to stay with her. His expression softened. He lay down beside her and held her, saying that of course they would sleep together. They talked about his album. He joked that his voice had become as sweet as sugar, and the director had asked if he was in love. Then he asked seriously if everything was all right with her. Instead of answering, she kissed him. The kiss deepened and passion flared between them. He kissed her neck, her hands, their fingers intertwined. She had thought it would just be a kiss, but her body was already on fire. She wrapped her arms around him, surrendering to her feelings. He whispered in her ear, asking if she had class tomorrow. She said no, but she had to go to the station. He asked what time. She murmured, 3 p.m. "We've got plenty of time." He smirked, pulling her even closer into his arms. The next day, sitting in the car, she blushed remembering the night. They had made love until dawn. And again in the morning, which almost made her late. Dokyung asked if the recording was in the old building today. She confirmed, saying she got a last-minute message yesterday about the location change. Dokyung frowned. He said they had moved to the new building over half a year ago. Why film in the old one? He added that all the furniture had already been moved out. It felt suspicious to him. He said he would pick her up after the shoot and told her to text him. Jiyoo agreed with a smile. She was a little worried that Chanhee and Dokyung might run into each other, but decided to just ignore her ex and leave quickly. Dokyung said he would be waiting outside the building. She thought, what could possibly go wrong? The old building was empty and dark. She found the designated waiting room. She walked in and said hello, but no one was inside. She wondered why no one was there and why the lights were off. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. A hand pushed her and she fell. Chanhee loomed over her, saying she couldn't run away now. She demanded he let her go, but he started spewing nonsense about how he'd been thinking of her and how they shouldn't have broken up. He begged her to come back, promising he'd fix everything. Jiyoo saw madness in his eyes. She realized he was dangerous and that this was a straight-up crime. She threatened to go to the police, but he only laughed and let his hands wander over her body. He started making crude jokes. She fought back, screaming that she'd kill him if he touched her. She was in despair, crying out for help and silently calling for Dokyung. Chanhee pinned her down. Suddenly, he heard a noise. The next second, someone slammed a chair across his back with all their might. He collapsed onto the floor, not knowing who had attacked him. It was Dokyung. He scooped the terrified Jiyoo up into his arms. He asked her anxiously if she was okay or if she was hurt. She could only nod, clinging to his chest, feeling her heart pounding wildly. Dokyung's eyes filled with ice-cold rage. Chanhee, coming to, asked in shock how Dokyung had found them. He muttered that Dokyung must have been stalking them. He spat out that he knew something was going on between them and started insulting Jiyoo. He threatened to ruin Dokyung's career, but Dokyung just walked right up to him. Dokyung grabbed him by the collar and Chanhee shrieked in pain. "Go ahead, report me, you bastard," Dokyung growled. He promised that even if he went to prison, he'd kill him first so he'd never show his face to Jiyoo again. He kept beating him, asking if he still wanted to call the cops. Jiyoo realized in horror that if this continued, it wouldn't be considered self-defense anymore. If Dokyung got caught in an assault scandal, his album, his image, everything would be ruined. She rushed to him, throwing her arms around him from behind and begging him to stop. He told her to let go, his eyes burning with anger. With tears in her eyes, she pleaded with him not to do it. "Please don't do this for my sake," she sobbed. Finally, he stopped. Jiyoo held him from behind while Chanhee lay unconscious on the floor. In the car, Dokyung asked why she hadn't told him anything. His voice trembled with suppressed anger and pain. He said that when he saw that scene, he felt the blood drain from his entire body. If he hadn't come because of a bad feeling, what would have happened if he wasn't there? Jiyoo broke down and apologized. She didn't want to tell him about this pathetic, disgusting ex who had beaten and threatened her. She had already shown him how much she suffered because of Chanhee when they were just friends. She knew how hard it was for him to comfort her back then. So she didn't want to worry him again. But in the end, he found out in an even more horrific way. Dokyung took her hand and told her not to cry. The only thing that mattered was that she was safe. After getting home, he tucked her into bed and told her to rest. She asked anxiously where he was going. He assured her he'd be right there and wouldn't leave her side. He lay down next to her and held her tight. She started worrying about what Chanhee might do next. Dokyung pulled the blanket over her head, cutting off her panic. He told her not to think about anything and to just stay with him. She looked at him and slowly closed her eyes, calming down in his arms. Later, Dokyung talked to his manager on the phone, telling him he had hit someone. The manager was furious, screaming that Dokyung had lost his mind with his comeback right around the corner. He asked why Dokyung had hit the guy. Chanhee's vile words about Jiyoo flashed through Dokyung's mind. He thought to himself that he should have just killed the bastard. He hung up after apologizing to the manager. He went back to the bedroom and lay down next to the sleeping Jiyoo. 2 days later, rumors started to swirl. A news article broke, claiming that top singer H had attacked a TV producer and threatened to kill him. Chan-hee gloated as he read the comments online. The rumor was spreading perfectly. He reveled in his revenge, anticipating the total collapse of Do-hyun's career. At that moment, he got a text from Jiyoo asking to meet. He smiled smugly, thinking he knew she'd cave. They met at a cafe. Chan-hee smirked, noting that since she reached out first, it must be urgent. He bragged about how good the article turned out. Jiyoo stayed calm. She coldly stated that he was the one in a desperate situation. She mentioned she'd heard rumors he'd gotten a divorce and was kicked out with nothing. He was shocked, wondering how she could possibly know. He tried to save face, assuming she had come to beg for mercy because she was scared for Do-hyun's career. Jiyoo silently placed a folder on the table and told him to open it. He mocked her, asking if she'd brought settlement money. Upon opening the folder, he froze in horror. Jiyoo calmly explained that, luckily, the security camera in the old building's hallway was still functional. The folder contained footage of him dragging her by force, photos of her bruises, and a doctor's report confirming the assault. She added that no filming had been scheduled in that building, which she confirmed with the junior writer. Chan-hee tried to bluff, but his laughter sounded hysterical. Jiyoo declared she was taking everything straight to the police. Everyone would know the producer harassed a cast member, attacked her, and Do-hyun saved her. She said his only real achievement in life was his job at the station, and she would make sure he lost it. Desperate, he began to threaten her, saying the scandal would ruin her too. He yelled that no one would attend her lectures once they found out about her fling with a celebrity. He said people would be more interested in how they met and started dating. Jiyoo thought to herself how vile he still was. Out loud, she said she didn't care. She'd worked nonstop for years. Maybe it was time for a break anyway. But she would stay and watch until he was completely destroyed. Chan-hee was terrified. He asked what she wanted. She demanded he clean up the mess he'd made and quit the show. And she never wanted to see his disgusting face again. She got up and walked out. Chan-hee was crushed. He couldn't believe she didn't care about her own reputation. He'd always thought she was just like him, ambitious and always looking ahead. He couldn't believe she was willing to throw away her career without hesitation, just because of what might happen to Kim Dokyung. He collapsed into his chair, powerless. At that moment, his phone rang. It was the director. The director was screaming through the phone. Chan-hee panicked, swearing he never even thought about touching his daughter. He didn't understand what the director meant until he felt something being poured over him. The junior writer was standing behind him, pouring a drink over his head. He realized in horror that her father was the director. The girl hissed his name with pure hatred. Within 3 hours of her threat, the assault rumor was deleted and a retraction was issued. Jiyoo laughed in relief while driving. She thought about further revenge, but decided Chan-hee was already finished. While gathering evidence against him, she had learned a lot from a friend who worked at the same channel. It turned out he'd cheated on his wife even while she was pregnant and had already received a warning. One more slip-up and he was out. She also remembered calling the junior writer, who confirmed there were no shoots in the old building. Who would have thought that girl was the director's daughter? Jiyoo remembered the girl's scared face when she asked if Chan-hee was married. In any case, everything worked out. She decided she'd tell Do-hyun everything was settled once she finished her work. But her body couldn't take it anymore. She woke up in the hospital on an IV, realizing her body had finally given out. The lectures, the filming, the brutal schedule, the stalker psycho. And on top of all that, worrying about Do-hyun. She had passed out right after her class ended. Suddenly, a frantic Do-hyun burst into the hospital room. He rushed to her side, asking in a panic if she was all right. She assured him she was fine now and asked where his mask and glasses were. With a serious expression, he said they would talk at home. Jiyoo realized Do-hyun was very, very angry. A little later, he walked up to the reception desk to pay for a patient's treatment. The nurse looked up and froze. She recognized the famous idol, Kim Dokyung, and her heart skipped a beat. At that very moment, rumors were flying across the city. Chat groups were buzzing that Dokyung was at the ER, not as a patient, but as someone's guardian. The news about him being assaulted had turned out to be false. The flustered nurse, blushing, asked for the patient's name. With icy composure, Do-hyun stated the name, Lim Jiyoo. An oppressive silence hung in the car. The air felt thick and heavy. Jiyoo shrank in her seat. She had never seen Do-hyun this angry in all the time they'd been together. She timidly asked how he knew where she was. Dogyun, his eyes fixed on the road, replied that she wasn't answering her phone, so he had to call her academy. Jiyoo gave a guilty smile, realizing just how much she had made him worry. The silence in the car was crushing, and she had no idea how to fix the situation or calm his anger. When they got home, he silently tucked her into bed, adjusting the blanket. A cold detachment emanated from his movements. As Dogyun was about to leave, Jiyoo instinctively grabbed his hand, begging him not to go. He told her he was too angry to talk right now and that it was better to put it off until tomorrow. But Jiyoo didn't want to wait. She asked him to let his anger out now, as long as he didn't leave like this, abandoning her in agonizing tension. His patience snapped. He turned to her, his voice laced with pain, and asked what he even meant to her if she could act this way. And then he began to explain what had driven him into such a rage. It all started with a conversation with his manager at work. He was told that all the articles about the assault had suddenly vanished. Dogyun knew immediately. She had met with that bastard Kim Chan-hee again, and she had gone alone. A single thought raced through his mind, making his blood run cold. Why did she go to him without telling me? Memories of the day she was almost hurt flared up again, fanning the flames of his fury. He had immediately started calling her, but her phone went unanswered. Every second of silence was driving him crazy, making him imagine the worst. In desperation, he called her academy. That's when he heard the shocking news. Jiyoo had collapsed from severe gastritis and was rushed to the hospital. He looked at her with a mix of pain and anger, asking why she hadn't told him anything. Did she not think for a second about how worried he would be? Jiyoo couldn't say a word. He asked if she had really thought he would be grateful. She just hadn't wanted to bother him. Dogyun demanded she tell him everything that happened today, without leaving out a single detail. And so Jiyoo told him. She laid it all out, starting with how she had dug up dirt on Kim Chan-hee, and ending with the conversation they had when they met. Dogyun listened, his expression growing darker. He couldn't believe she was willing to so easily throw away the career she had built for years, all for him. She quietly argued that it wasn't just because of him. But he cut her off, saying she was acting just like him. Jiyoo explained that she didn't want him to destroy 10 years of hard work because of her. A scandal could have ruined his career. The album recording was almost done. The concert was just around the corner. She simply thought this was the best way. Tears streamed down her cheeks as Dogyun firmly said that he wasn't grateful for what she did. He gently covered her hand with his, asking why she was taking responsibility for his actions. She knew what kind of person Chan-hee was, so why did she go to him without fear? He pulled her into a hug, his voice softer but more insistent. He begged her to never do this again. Dogyun asked her to promise that from now on she would tell him everything that happens. Jiyoo, burying her face in his chest, sobbed and asked him to stop being mad too. The day had been incredibly hard, and all he was doing was scolding her. She called him mean and hugged him tighter, seeking comfort. To lighten the mood, Dogyun gently bumped the top of her head with his chin. Jokingly, he said that she had aged him 10 years. She replied that he was still handsome anyway. Dogyun was momentarily taken aback, unsure how to react. And then he simply leaned in and kissed her gently, pouring all his worry and relief into that kiss. He pulled her onto his lap, playfully asking if she really thought a kiss would fix everything. Looking at her flustered, tear-streaked face, he couldn't help but smile. She was incredibly cute. Once they had calmed down, they lay in bed together. Jiyoo asked him to give her his new album first, with an autograph. Dogyun replied that she always gets it first. She worried about the articles that, although quickly deleted, had been seen by many. But Dogyun reassured her, saying his manager thought the timing was perfect. As it turned out, the manager had proposed a brilliant plan. Turn the assault scandal into dating news. Claim that Dogyun hit the guy because he was harassing his girlfriend. Romance instead of assault. A genius move. Jiyoo realized the manager must have felt a huge weight lifted off his shoulders. Dogyun agreed, but added that they shouldn't do it again. At that moment, she had no idea that the internet was already flooded with articles about their relationship. The next morning, she was awakened by the persistent ringing of her phone. Still half asleep, she looked at the screen and was stunned. 72 missed calls from her mom, relatives, and even old classmates. There were even more messages. Her eyes widened in horror and confusion. What the hell was going on? She frantically shook Dogyun awake, shouting that there was absolute chaos outside. Early that morning, Dogyun had been summoned by his manager. After a brief discussion with the company, they released an official statement confirming their relationship. Despite the brewing scandal, life went on. Jiyoo was in the middle of a lecture explaining a complex math problem to her students. She was trying to get an important point across, but when she turned around, she saw that no one was listening. All the students were staring at her with immense curiosity, completely ignoring their studies. Jiyoo put on a bright smile and reminded them that the most important thing right now was the exam. The students reluctantly agreed, and she had to go back to the basics to regain their attention. After class, she was swarmed by her fellow teachers. They bombarded her with questions and envious comments, saying it now made sense why Dokyung had such a special look in his eyes. Embarrassed, Jiyoo tried to laugh it off, saying they hadn't been dating for very long. The administrator informed her that reporters were blowing up the phone lines. Jiyoo gave strict orders to only answer calls regarding student consultations and to focus on the students. Getting into her car after work, she felt utterly exhausted. It was a good thing she didn't have any evening classes today. She had expected whispers and calls, but being followed by reporters was an unpleasant surprise. Dokyung's warning from that morning had been prophetic. She remembered how he had warned her to be careful on her way to and from work, as journalists might be waiting for her. Even now, several suspicious cars were tailing her. The Kim Dokyung effect was far more intense than she had imagined. Suddenly, her phone rang. The screen displayed the name Jiyeon, her best friend. Jiyoo answered the call, and a playful voice on the other end jokingly called her Kim Jiyoo. She recalled joking 12 years ago that if she ever dated someone, she'd change her last name to his. Who would have thought it would actually happen? Her friend was indignant, asking why she had to find out from the news. Jiyoo explained that she was going to tell her, but the article came out of nowhere. She begged her friend not to be mad and asked where she was, since she had just gotten back to Korea. Jiyoon, walking through the airport with her suitcase, replied that she was far too busy to see Ms. Kim Jiyoo. This was Lee Jiyeon, a friend to both Jiyoo and Dokyung for 17 years. She said she was heading straight to the office from the airport, as she was starting work today. Jiyoo asked her to let her know as soon as she had free time. Jiyeon sarcastically promised to be on standby, ready to rush over at a moment's notice. Distracted by the phone call, Jiyeon bumped into someone. She immediately bowed and apologized, admitting she wasn't watching where she was going. When she looked up, she froze. Standing before her was an incredibly handsome man. For a second, she was speechless, just staring at his perfect face. His gaze was intense and a little cold, which only added to his charm. Suddenly, she noticed a crack on the screen of his phone, which he had dropped during the collision. Jiyeon immediately offered to pay for the repairs, asking for his account number. The man just muttered, "Damn it." He asked with a smirk if this was how people get numbers these days, implying she did it on purpose. Jiyeon flushed with indignation. What kind of guy was this? Did he think she intentionally bumped into him just to get his number? What confidence. Though looking at his face, she reluctantly admitted he had reason to be. Annoyed, she silently conceded that his looks justified his arrogance. She tried to explain that she genuinely wanted to pay for the repairs, but he waved her off, said he didn't want to talk to her, and walked away. Jiyeon shouted after him, but he didn't even turn around. Later at the office, she was still fuming. What an attitude. He just made up his own story. As if having to go to the office right after a long flight wasn't bad enough, she had to deal with that unpleasant incident. She comforted herself with the thought that she'd never see him again. But when the elevator doors opened, she stood in shock. The very same guy was standing right in front of her. Their eyes met. Both were completely stunned by the unexpected reunion. She couldn't believe her eyes. Why was he coming out of here? He curtly asked if she was getting on, and she stepped into the elevator as if in a daze. Could they possibly work at the same company? It was an incredibly small world. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit that made him look even more attractive. Suddenly, a crowd of people pushed into the elevator, even though it wasn't rush hour. The elevator was packed, and she was pressed against him. Someone in the crowd said the last person who got in would have to get out. She knew it was inevitable in such a tight space, but she still felt awkward. It was too tight. Too close. She felt like she couldn't breathe, and her cheeks were burning. She noticed that he was holding onto the handrail, creating a small barrier around her. She couldn't tell. Was he trying to protect her? Or did he just not want to touch her? Either way, she felt a little more comfortable thanks to him. Finally, the crowd poured out, leaving just the two of them in the elevator. She awkwardly broke the silence, asking if his phone was okay. She added that she was just worried and wanted to know if he'd gotten it repaired. He coldly replied that if she were worried, she wouldn't have slammed into him in the first place. Jiyeon exploded. Why would she even want to talk to such a rude person? She only asked out of politeness. At that moment, the elevator jolted violently. She lost her balance and cried out as she fell right into him. Her drink spilled all over the floor. Before she could process what was happening, the elevator came to a sudden halt, and she found herself in his arms. Jiyeon was lying on top of him in an awkward position, their faces inches apart. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, Jiyoo was waiting for a call from her friend who had promised to call back soon. She was worried they might not be able to meet this week since they were both so busy. Dogyun gently touched her cheek, pulling her out of her thoughts. He noted that she wasn't listening to him at all. Jiyoo apologized and asked him to repeat himself. He smiled and asked again if she wanted anything to eat. Her eyes lit up. Popcorn and nachos, of course. You can't watch a movie without them. As they stood in line, even though their faces were partially covered, people around them started to recognize them and whisper. How did they end up on a date? It was simple. Dogyun finished work early and suggested they meet, and Jiyoo wanted to see a movie. She never thought they would actually go to a movie theater. Jiyoo had been sure they would just watch a movie at home, as usual, in Dogyun's amazing home theater. When he came back with the snacks, he took her hand and led her in a different direction, saying there was something he wanted to do first. He led her to a photo booth, suggesting they take a picture to commemorate their first date. Dogyun reminded her that they had taken photos together before, but this was their first time alone. The timer started its countdown. Just before the flash, he suddenly pulled her close. She wasn't ready, so the first picture captured her surprised but cute expression. He suggested another photo, and this time she smiled and made a peace sign. For the last shot, as the timer counted down the final seconds, he unexpectedly kissed her. The result was a charming strip of 4 photos. Her surprise, their shared smile, his gentle gaze, and finally, a spontaneous kiss. Jiyoo looked at the photos, smiling shyly. The kiss was unexpected, but the pictures turned out great. Dogyun, holding a tray of popcorn, hurried her along, saying the movie was about to start. When they entered the theater, Jiyoo was surprised. It was completely empty. Dogyun smiled and confessed that he had rented out the entire theater just for them. He took off his cap and glasses, happy that they were finally alone. Meanwhile, some interesting events were unfolding in the elevator. Back in the stuck elevator, Jihoon asked if she was going to move. Jiyeon scrambled to her feet in a panic. She got up so quickly that her heel twisted, and she nearly fell again. Jihoon just sighed in disbelief at her clumsiness. He pressed the emergency call button. The elevator had stopped and the lights had gone out. The operator informed them that a maintenance crew would arrive in 20 minutes. Jihoon impatiently urged them to hurry, saying he was busy. After thanking the operator, he hung up. Jihoon was furious. First day of work, and of all things, the elevator had to break down. He heard a faint groan and turned around. Jiyeon was sitting on the floor, rubbing her ankle. He walked over and asked if she was all right. Looking at her face, he felt a sense of familiarity. He crouched down beside her, trying to remember where he might have seen her before. He studied her features and memories began to surface. Jiyeon, noticing his intense stare, blushed and pulled away. She indignantly asked why he was getting so close, like some kind of pervert. He smirked, telling her not to flatter herself. He was just checking something and had no intention of touching her. Jihoon reminded her that she was the one who had pounced on him earlier. Jiyeon was furious at his words. She called him rude, and they started bickering. He paused, considering her words. Was he really being rude? Just then, a chime sounded, and the elevator doors began to open. The repairmen were greeted by a strange sight. 2 people sitting on the floor in the dark next to a spilled drink. Back to the movie date. Jiyoo asked why he had to rent the whole theater. Dogyun replied that it was more comfortable to watch this way. They settled into their seats, and as he fed her popcorn, he jokingly told her not to stare too much at the male lead because he was much better. Jiyoo laughed. He immediately began listing his advantages. He was 5 centimeters taller, and his skin was better, unlike actors who fake their height. Suddenly, a commercial started on the screen, and a familiar voice announced that a perfect morning starts with a perfect shave. Jiyoo turned to the screen and saw Dogyun, shirtless, with perfect abs. She was shocked, asking when he had filmed such a commercial. He admitted it was a month ago and that he was seeing it for the first time too. The commercial continued, showcasing his flawless appearance. Jiyoo thought that even though he was her boyfriend, it was insane how good-looking he was. Dogyun told her to watch until the end, but then immediately told her to focus on the movie, which was about to start. They started watching the movie, but soon Jiyoo felt her head resting on his shoulder. She looked at him with affection, and unable to resist, he leaned in for a kiss. In the empty theater, illuminated by the screen, their lips met in a long, passionate kiss. Jiyoo pulled away, shyly asking what he was doing, since they were in a public place, even if they were alone. He whispered that he couldn't focus on the movie with her right there. In the middle of the kiss, she felt something on her finger. It was a ring. She stared at the elegant piece of jewelry, stunned. When had he prepared all this? It was beautiful. Dokyun explained that he just wanted to take her to the movies for a real date, not like the usual nights at home. But now he realized it wouldn't work. Jiyoo was too beautiful for him to think about anything else. He took her hand and suggested with a smirk that from now on, they should only watch movies at home. Soon, before she even had a chance to react, Dokyun was kissing her, pressing her gently against the apartment door. After moving into the room, they continued hugging and kissing, forgetting about everything else in the world. It was a night when they were completely consumed by their feelings, utterly unable to tear themselves away from each other. Their idyllic moment was interrupted by a phone call. It was Jiyoo's mom. Wrapped in a blanket, Jiyoo answered. Her mother immediately started scolding her for not answering her calls. Jiyoo apologized, lying about some urgent matter. But her mom was interested in something else. Why hadn't she told her she was dating Dokyun? The whole neighborhood was talking about it. Jiyoo smiled sheepishly. Her mom reminded her that she used to say she liked him too. But her mother was worried that dating such a famous person would bring her daughter a lot of trouble. Jiyoo was touched by her mother's concern and assured her that she had also thought about it a lot. She looked at Dokyun and said with confidence that he was a great person and could handle anything. She praised him, saying how sweet and kind he was and how much he treasured her. Her mom laughed, then dropped a bombshell. Her younger brother was back in Korea and would be staying with her for a while. Jiyoo was in shock. Living with her grown-up little brother? But her mom was adamant. He couldn't stay in a hotel when his sister had a spacious house. Her mom explained it would put her mind at ease. Then she added that if Jiyoo got pregnant, her father would kill her before her mom did. Jiyoo blushed with embarrassment. Her mom told her to get a room ready for her brother because he was coming over right after work. Right now? Jiyoo and Dokyun exchanged horrified glances. Panic erupted. Jiyoo scrambled around the room, trying to get dressed quickly and hide any evidence of Dokyun's presence. The door opened and her brother stood in the doorway, asking why it took so long to open. It was Lim Jiyoo, her 28-year-old younger brother. He nonchalantly asked where his room was. Jiyoo scolded him for not giving her a heads up. She had just found out from their mom. She noticed a bruise on his face and asked what happened, if he'd gotten into a fight. He brushed it off, saying he was just tired and had a minor accident. Then he added with a smirk that he'd heard about her relationship with Dokyun and promised to cooperate by covering for her with their mom if she came home late. He headed towards one of the rooms, but Jiyoo frantically rushed to stop him. She yelled for him not to go in because in that room right now was... The door opened and Dokyun walked out. He calmly greeted Jihun, saying it had been a while. Jihun froze on the spot, not believing his eyes. Dokyun Hyung? He turned to his sister with a silent question. She mumbled something awkwardly. Jihun coldly advised Dokyun to leave. Jiyoo gave Dokyun an awkward wave goodbye while Jihun glared daggers at both of them. Once Dokyun was gone, Jihun declared that they should both sleep in their own apartments. Jiyoo retorted, asking if he thought he was her dad, telling her what to do. But Jihun had leverage. He said that what he told their mom would depend on his sister's behavior. He advised her to think carefully about how to make him an ally, not an obstacle. Finally, he announced that he would be watching her closely and went to bed. Jiyoo was left standing in the hallway, completely bewildered by this sudden hurricane. Over dinner, Jihun asked his sister about her work, mentioning he'd heard about her important new project. Then he said he needed to meet with Dokyun. Jiyoo brightened, suggesting they all meet together, but her brother cut her off. They would meet alone. Jiyoo was indignant. What were they going to talk about without her? Jihun explained that it would be a man-to-man talk. He wanted to have a drink with Dokyun and figure out what kind of person he was. She started defending Dokyun, but her brother just teased her for already doting on him. He reminded her that their father would be calling soon, and it would be wise to get his support beforehand. Jiyoo realized he was right. She sighed and agreed to ask Dokyun. Jiyoo texted Dokyun that Jihun wanted to meet him. Dokyun happily agreed. The manager, seeing Dokyun's smile, remarked on how happy he was. He also expressed relief that the assault case was resolved thanks to Jiyoo. The reaction to the dating news wasn't great, but at least it was better than him dating someone weird. The manager handed Dokyun a folder, informing him that an offer for a variety show had come in. Dokyun looked at the documents with surprise. It was an offer to appear on a reality dating show called Omniscient Lover's Viewpoint. The next day, Jiyeon and Jihun ran into each other by the elevator once again. They stood in awkward silence. Both were thinking less than flattering thoughts about each other. Annoying woman and rude bastard. What a terrible start to a Friday morning. Jiyeon thought about how she had returned to Korea for a new project at the company. But she never could have imagined that her first impression would be ruined by that embarrassing fall in the elevator. When they got off on the same floor, her worst fears were confirmed. A colleague met them and cheerfully introduced them to each other. He introduced her as manager Lim Jiyoo, the team leader, and him as assistant manager Lim Jiyoo, their main designer. The colleague gushed about what a good-looking pair they made, oblivious to their mutual dislike. Jihun couldn't believe he had to work with this brat in the same company. And as if that wasn't bad enough, their desks were right next to each other. It was an important project, and they would have to work together for at least 6 months. Jiyeon sighed heavily. Could fate be any crueler? Suddenly, her phone pinged. It was a message in the work chat. The department head was suggesting a company dinner to get to know each other. And so, the whole team was soon sitting in a restaurant, raising their glasses. Jiyeon thought about how different Korean office culture was from the American one. She hadn't been to a dinner like this in a long time. To their surprise, the vice president himself showed up for the dinner, emphasizing the company's high hopes for their team. The department head was about to pour the VP a drink, but he was stopped. The vice president said he would prefer a drink from team leader Lee. With a greasy smile, he mentioned that managing director Choi had been praising her beauty, and now he could see it was true. He held out his glass, asking pretty Ms. Lee to pour him a drink. Jiyeon felt uncomfortable with his tone and gestures. She tried to tell herself she was being too sensitive. Maybe she just wasn't used to Korean customs after living in the US for so long. Suddenly, Jihun coughed loudly, interrupting the awkward scene. He took the bottle from her hands and politely offered to pour the drink for the vice president himself. He asked with an icy smile if that would be all right. Jihun stood up and poured the drink, completely shifting the attention to himself. The department head was shocked by such audacity. Jiyeon looked at Jihun in surprise, not understanding why he had suddenly intervened. To everyone's astonishment, the vice president beamed and accepted the drink. He happily took the drink from Jihun. Jiyeon felt a wave of relief. She thought about how he was always so annoyingly sharp with her, yet he had just helped her. She remembered how he had shielded her in the crowded elevator. Maybe he didn't hate her after all. She looked at him curiously, but he avoided her gaze. Soon, the vice president decided to leave so the young people could have fun. As a parting gift, he gave Jiyeon his corporate card to pay the bill. She politely accepted the card and wished him a safe trip home. After the bosses left, the team decided to move to another place for a second round. The atmosphere in the pub was more relaxed, and everyone decided to introduce themselves. Kim Charon from sales and Choi Yoon-yu from finance. Kim Min-jae, an engineer, and Lee Ho-jin from marketing. Then it was Im Ji-hun's turn, the designer who had transferred from another company. And finally, Lee Ji-yeon, the project manager, who asked for her colleagues' help as she was still adjusting to working in Korea. She made a toast to the team's success. Everyone tearfully raised their mugs of beer. One of the colleagues complimented Jihun, saying that when she first saw him, she thought he was a model. He gave a smug smile, which only annoyed Jiyeon. A colleague noticed Jiyeon's flushed face and kindly offered her a glass of cold water. She thanked him, feeling even more embarrassed. She blamed it on nerves and the heat, but Jihun's silent stare was making her nervous. The colleague started teasing the considerate Yoon-yu, and the atmosphere grew more playful. Jiyeon felt the evening was taking a strange turn. An employee thankfully changed the subject, asking about the work-related workshop. Jiyeon confirmed that a trip was planned, but the details would be announced later. It was getting close to midnight, and everyone decided to call it a night. 2 colleagues said their goodbyes and left first. The remaining group discussed their routes home. Jiyeon said she lived in Uido. To her surprise, Jihun said he lived in Uido too. The other colleagues lived in different areas, so they said their goodbyes and left. And so they were left alone together again. The awkwardness returned in full force. She quickly said goodbye and hurried away. In her haste, she stumbled on her heels again and started to fall. Jihun caught her at the last second, holding her tightly. She thanked him, but he asked accusingly if she was doing this on purpose. Jiyeon was taken aback by his words. What did he mean? He advised her to either drink less or stop wearing heels if she couldn't do anything right. She snapped, telling him to mind his own business. But he replied that it bothered him. Every time he saw her, she was either hurt or in trouble. Jiyeon tried to put him in his place, accusing him of not knowing how to separate work and personal matters. He suddenly addressed her by her full name, Ms. Lee Jiyeon, which sounded like a challenge. He grabbed her hand and suggested they get a drink, just the two of them. Sitting in the pub, Ji-yeon declared that starting today, they were burying all the bad blood between them. Smiling, she offered to pour him a drink first. He replied that she could pour as much as she wanted. She accepted the challenge. If he wanted as much as she wanted, so be it. She filled his glass to the brim, determined to settle this once and for all. The next thing she knew, she was staring at the ceiling of her apartment with a strange feeling. Why was she kissing this guy? Alcohol and emotions had mixed into one passionate, reckless kiss. He pulled back, his breathing heavy. He said he wanted to ask her just one thing. With drunken tenderness in his voice, he asked if she had anything against younger man. Ji-yeon looked at him with dazed eyes. Meanwhile, Jiyoo, eating a pastry, was discussing the reality show offer with Dokyung. It turned out she had received a call too. Dokyung wasn't surprised, as many public couples appear on such shows. He just didn't expect it to happen so soon. He asked Jiyoo what she thought about it. After a moment's thought, she honestly admitted that she wanted to do it. If they participated in the show, they would no longer have to hide and could go on dates in public places freely. But one doubt plagued her. What if they broke up? Of course, she had no intention of breaking up with Dokyung, but if it ever happened, the aftermath would be devastating. Seeing their immortalized relationship on video over and over would be unbearably painful. Dokyung suddenly bit her finger gently, interrupting her dark thoughts. He told her not to think about useless things. "We're not breaking up," he said firmly, looking her straight in the eye. He teased her, saying she wanted a public relationship but wasn't even prepared for such thoughts. Was she already planning to leave him? She immediately started denying it fiercely. Then he said with a sly smile, "If you're that scared, then marry me." Her heart started pounding like crazy. What kind of proposal was this? He chuckled, saying he'd just been rejected. He added that she was the one thinking about breaking up, not him. He grew more serious. If she was hesitating because of her work or other reasons, he would understand. But if it was because she was anxious about their future, she shouldn't worry. Because, as he had already said, they were not breaking up. His confidence amazed her. She felt deeply touched. How could he be so sure? He had more to lose than she did. In the end, she said she would think about it for one more day. Dokyung agreed, emphasizing that her desire was the most important thing. He kissed her gently on the cheek, letting her know he would accept whatever she decided. He asked about Jihoon. Jiyoo replied that he had a company dinner and would probably stay out for the night. She added with a laugh that her brother had strictly forbidden her from sleeping anywhere but home. At that same time, Jiyeon was wondering how things had come to this. To understand, we have to go back an hour. She and Jihoon were alone in the restaurant. They were drinking in an awkward silence. She thanked him for his help with the vice president and for catching her when she fell. He replied that she made him worry. She sarcastically said she would buy him a meal sometime as thanks. He immediately asked, "When?" She was caught off guard. He insisted they decide now, otherwise, in his opinion, she would forget again. Again? What did he mean by that? She assured him she wouldn't forget, and they agreed to meet next Saturday at noon. They drank a final toast. After that, she got very drunk. As they were leaving the restaurant, she stumbled again, and her heel broke. Jihoon walked her all the way home. At her door, he asked if she didn't like it. She didn't understand what he meant. He pinned her against the wall. He asked her directly if she really wasn't interested in younger guys. She got flustered and asked if he knew how old she was. He calmly replied that he did. 32. She was shocked. She couldn't understand how he knew, as she hadn't told him. He ignored her question and repeated his with a smile. "So, does she like younger guys?" And she, giving in to the moment and the alcohol, whispered, "I like them," and kissed him. A thought flashed through her drunken mind. She was in big trouble. She had kissed him without thinking. They ended up on her bed. He wasn't just younger, he was her colleague whom she would see every day. She had to stop this. She tried to say something, but when she saw him taking off his shirt, revealing a perfect physique, the words got stuck in her throat. He asked if she wanted to say something. Jiyeon covered her face with her hands and muttered, "No, nothing." She was doomed. The next day, Jiyoo and Dokyung arrived for a meeting with the reality show's producer. The producer admitted she hadn't expected them to agree after the recent incident. She mentioned a small problem that had just come up. It turned out an article had already been published online about them joining the show. The news had leaked instantly. Jiyoo realized they had no choice now. The TV people had cleverly trapped them. On the way home, Dogyun asked Jiyoo to promise him not to read any articles or comments about their show. He said her mental fortitude was as fragile as tofu, and during filming, she should only look at him and not worry. She laughed happily and agreed. She thought to herself that he was a fool and that she was used to this kind of thing. But his concern was very sweet. He asked what time she was meeting Jiyeon. She replied, around 8 in the evening. Dogyun said he had a concert meeting that might run late, so he probably wouldn't make it. They decided the three of them would see Jiyeon next time. That evening, Jiyoo was already waiting for her friend at the restaurant. Jiyeon walked in, looking absolutely stunning. She immediately started asking about Dogyun, unable to believe that the guy Jiyoo had been talking about was him. Jiyoo apologized for not telling her sooner, but back then, she had no idea how things would turn out. Jiyeon laughed, saying Jiyoo was the only one who didn't notice Dogyun liked her. She remembered how Dogyun always took care of Jiyoo, even when it was the three of them. Considering Dogyun hadn't had a girlfriend for the last 7 years, it was obvious to Jiyeon. She confessed that she pretended not to know, afraid of messing things up between them. Jiyoo, touched, looked down at the ring on her finger. Jiyeon teased her friend, asking if she really liked Dogyun that much. Judging by Jiyoo's face, the answer was obvious. She congratulated them, saying they looked great together. After trying the food, Jiyeon was ecstatic. Jiyoo, happy, told her friend to order anything she wanted. Jiyeon showed her the article on her phone about their reality show, surprised at how quickly everything was happening. Jiyoo admitted she hadn't wanted to go public so soon, but it was all because of Kim Chan-hee. Hearing his name, Jiyeon exploded with rage. She couldn't believe that bastard was back in their lives. She even offered to go and beat him up. Jiyoo calmed her down, saying Dogyun had already roughed him up a bit. Just then, the waiter brought them their grilled fish. Jiyeon looked at her friend, noticing how her eyes were shining. But her friend had already turned her attention to the food, forgetting everything else. Jiyoo recalled that Jiyeon had always been popular with guys, but turned everyone down. She rejected any offer, whether it was a movie or a blind date. No matter how many guys tried to ask her out, she always said she wasn't interested in a relationship. One day, Jiyoo asked her when she was ever going to date someone. Jiyeon replied that she was waiting for someone with whom she would feel a fateful spark. Because of this, Jiyeon had never been in a relationship. Jiyoo decided to ask if she was seeing anyone now. She expected to hear the usual no. But her friend's reaction was different. She seemed thoughtful, which was very unlike her. Jiyoo immediately bombarded her with questions. Who is he? How old is he? What does he look like? Jiyeon blushed, not knowing what to say. She started to explain that he was a new employee on her team, and he was younger than her. An image of Jihoon flashed in her mind. Jiyoo was thrilled that her friend had a younger man interested in her. She asked about his personality. Jiyeon said that at first he seemed like a jerk, but maybe he wasn't. Jiyoo hoped he was a good person and advised her friend to speed things up. Jiyeon blushed even more at the mention of a kiss and said they had only agreed to have dinner that weekend. She could never tell Jiyoo that they had done much more than just kiss. At that moment, Jiyoo's brother called and asked when she was coming. He announced he would pick her up himself in 20 minutes, not taking no for an answer. Jiyeon asked in surprise if it was Dogyun. Jiyoo replied that it was her younger brother who had also returned to Korea. Jiyeon smiled, remarking on what a sweet brother she had. She remembered how he used to bring them an umbrella in middle school when it rained. She tried to recall his name. Jiyoo waved it off, saying his name wasn't worth remembering. She offered to have her brother give Jiyeon a ride too, since she lived nearby. And then it hit Jiyoo. She remembered that Im Jihoon's first love was Jiyeon. The story flashed back 14 years to an airport. Friends were encouraging a young Jihoon who was leaving to study in the US. He was in love with Jiyeon but could never bring himself to confess. Dogyun jokingly asked what he would do if Jiyeon got a boyfriend while he was in America. Jihoon quietly replied that he didn't care. He declared that it didn't matter if she got a boyfriend, because he was going to marry her in the end anyway. Back in the present, Jiyoo looked at her friend, remembering her brother's childish but serious words. Just then, a tall guy walked into the restaurant. The waiter told him they were closing soon. Jihoon appeared in the doorway, saying he was here to pick up his party. He really had arrived fast.